about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampireanddevil show. We want to welcome you to the Vampireanddevil show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampireanddevil show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampireanddevil show.
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampireanddevil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some Brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll. Brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the Brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampireanddevil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh, yeah. You want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampireanddevil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be because Vampireanddevil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities.
Fangs alike as it gets into the darker, the cooler weather, the vampire-friendly weather. Devil, my friend, fuck you, by the way, as your nice beloved heat goes away. I think a few of our fangs want to take advantage of the closing out weather, the end of the summer, and go to the beach. But Devil, my friend, my question to you is, do they really want to know that? As we discuss the letter J.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's that time of the year where you get to go to the beaches and swim in the waters where you think you're safe, but are you really safe? Because there could be a shark there, and it could be a vicious shark. It could be a shark named Bruce, who's not really even a shark, but a big animatronic that Steven Spielberg made. But anyway, it still might get you. It just, like I said, it just, brings up the question of, like, what are you going to do on the 4th of July? You're going to get eaten by a fucking shark. That's what you're going to do.
That you are, absolutely. Sounds to me like we have to discuss Jaws.
Yeah, a little bit of Jaws action, you know what I mean? It was one of those movies that I remember... we talk about these, these movies, these horror movies that are influential, and people are like, you know, go out and buy this or go out and do this or go out and stay away from that. I mean, it's one of the best things and worst things to happen in the motion pictures of movies, because it's such a great movie and it's so iconic and everybody loves Jaws, but it kind of had the reverse effect where so many people watched this movie that a lot of people didn't want to go to the beaches very much anymore after
Yeah.
this movie. I mean, I just remember, you know, even as a kid, like in pools, you were like, "Oh my God, is there a shark gonna come and get you?" And you're like, "Well, I'm in a fucking pool. The shark is not gonna come get you out of nowhere." I mean, if you live in Florida, you might have an alligator come in and get you, but sharks are not gonna be in your swimming pools.
No, not at all. And it's funny, so like, because Jaws actually gets the credit of the movie that made me love horror. So, a well-known story I've done, you know, talking with other members of our community or just other people's shows and whatnot, is that there was an old, psychedelic succubus movie that I love now, that I saw at a slumber party back in the day, back when slumber parties were cool and they were the way. And like, I just don't personally believe that slumber parties can be anywhere near as cool now as they were back then, simply because of technology and social media and all that stuff. The cool thing about slumber parties back in the day when we were little vampies and devils and stuff like that was the fact that like it was the same routine, it was the same formula, but it was so perfect. It was, you designated what house the slumber party was going to be at. Those parents were the chaperones. Everybody went. Allergies didn't exist. You just got a bunch of pizza. Everybody was down. You took everybody to Blockbuster, and whatever movie the kids chose is the movie that would get watched. You know, the parents, the chaperones always turned a blind eye to it. But they let us choose like a really hardcore movie that had me in like hysterics. But the funny thing is I think it was simply my little vampiness not maturing quite yet, because about a year or so later, when you're in school, there's always that movie day. Call it the teacher hangover day, or just the, hey, you've had to deal with this for 3/4 of the year, we're just going to watch a movie. And the teacher showed Jaws. And I don't know what it was, but I was in it to win it. I was so scarred and such in hysterics after that slumber party experience that you would have thought I wouldn't get into horror at all or would want nothing to do with it. But I saw Jaws in class, in grade school. And I haven't yet figured out if that's the best teacher or the worst teacher ever based off that decision. But anyway, I loved that movie. It was so cool. I was so into it. There were eatings alives, and there was blood, and there was craziness, and it was such a crazy experience seeing a genuine beloved, item of the world, like destination of the world, that people just weren't willing to go to anymore, or at least for a while, because of the impact that one movie made.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like you can't even think of like things like that. You were saying like, the slumber parties. I mean, my slumber parties were always more like a massacre. But anyway, yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, that was
Future episode potential.
Yeah. I mean, that was always cool. Like like you said, you would just go and rent movies and just hang out and watch these movies. And like I said, Jaws is one of those ones where it's like, yeah, like everybody has watched that. Like I said, I mean, everybody has seen this movie, even if you're not a horror fan at all. Pretty much everybody has seen Jaws, or
Yeah.
at least knows what Jaws is. It's such an iconic movie, and not even is it not even just an iconic movie, just the 2 seconds of the song, the dunna dunna. Everybody knows that. I don't care what country you're from. I don't care what part of the world you're from. Even if you've never even seen the movie, which most people have, everybody knows dunna dunna, which is just associated with with sharks now. That even when you watch Shark Week and stuff like that, they add those into it and stuff like that. Where yeah, like it's like for Shark Week became a huge thing, yet this was the things that we had to go into. We had to watch these, movies about sharks. And it's like one of those ones where, I mean, if you look at it, ideally in a natural wise, yeah, this movie is definitely far fetched from how sharks normally act. Most sharks are not particularly, you know, humans aren't really on their menu for lunch. A lot of times when when the sharks do bite, they tend to think you're something else. Where in this movie, obviously, and movies that succumbed after Jaws, they started making it where it was like so much more of like this prehistoric creature that's just going to keep coming after you all the time. And like I said, it's like it's one of those ones, one of these movies that it was good when Steven Spielberg, bringing this in and kind of wanted to make it, and just the practical effects of like this movie versus watching a lot of these new shark movies now, like Megalodon, or even like Deep Blue Sea, and anything that has to do with even Sharknadoes and stuff like those, even though those are typically really really cheesy. There's something about the grittiness of using the practical effects and using like a prop, which is basically what they used in the Jaws movie, to make it look, I mean, when you watch it now, when kids who watch Jaws now will see that shark and go, oh my god, that's so horrible looking. And yes, even watching it now, rewatching it again, you're like, god. But at that time, man, that was something that just wasn't, that thing was way over the top of like how crazy that thing looked. And
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, it's to the point where even like a lot of the actors that knew that it was a fake shark still like bothered them a little bit. And I thought that was kind of cool. Like you don't have that, that nowadays, because you obviously are not gonna put you're not going to use a real shark for one, because obviously you can't use a real great white and stuff like that anyway. And two, it's like with the CGI and things like that nowadays, there's something about the old school mentality of like making this shark you know come to life, but to the advancements of at that time with the animatronics.
Absolutely. And I mean, while it's not an operation anymore, it's not operational anymore, it really was the first, in my opinion, real featured ride event of like an amusement park that you really wanted to go to. You wanted to experience, you wanted to go see it. And that was Universal Studios with the Jaws ride, with
Yeah,
actually having Jaws pop out of the water right alongside the boat as you were taking like the university tour. And it was
yeah,
first the first real one that I can remember. And now it's common. There's stuff for Harry Potter. There's stuff for House of a Thousand Corpses. They do. What is it called? Like Halloween Horror Nights or something like that.
yeah.
That they do out of those things. So like. And not even just in our genres, but I mean they've done rights for Star Wars, Back to the Future, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, keeping it on point, Jaws was also really the first movie that had such a cultural impact that they made a ride out of it as well.
Yeah. It was kind of, yeah. I got a chance to go down to Disney and go down to the Universal in Florida. And that was the one thing, remember as a kid, like I always wanted to go and ride the Jaws ride because you always saw it and stuff like that. Unfortunately, like I said, Universal had taken that ride out. You can see the Jaws, they have them all hanging there and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Take your pictures, but the ride is still alive in California. So if you're ever
Yes.
in Universal and Universal Studios, even though that's Universal Studios in California versus Universal Studios in Florida are two different ones, because the Florida one is more of a theme park. The California one is more of a, you go and see the behind the scenes in the back lot of of the studio. I mean, they do have some rides, and fortunately one of the rides you get to do is you get to see that Jaws thing. So it was like, yeah, it was just such a cool, like, even seeing in like in movies, I mean, like references in movies and stuff like that with you're talking about like in the beginning of Mallrats and stuff like that, where he was gonna propose. As I said, it's so crazy how much like this movie, and we haven't even started even talking about the movie, just the iconic popularity of this movie. I mean, any form of pop culture has referenced this movie and still references this movie from what almost 50 some years ago.
Yeah, and Kevin Smith referenced it twice because he used it in Mallrats. He also used it in Clerks when
Yeah.
Randall was just stirring a chip in a jar of salsa.
Yeah, salsa shark.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. But anyway, brother, yeah, let's get into the movie. So it's 1975. It's Steven Spielberg, and it is based around our return, figuratively speaking. But we're going to go back in time almost to an early episode of Vampire and Devil as we get to talk about Amityville again. But it takes place in the town of Amityville, but it basically it's featured around the town. It's not so much the family. The family gets involved, but it focuses around the town of Amityville as this shark is terrorizing like the beaches and the local waters of that, and the main character being that it's the local like sheriff is the guy who sees these things starting to happen as people are going missing and so on and so forth. But that's just the basic synopsis of how it is. But also, shout out to the late actress who actually just recently left us. But it also features a very well-known opening scene of about, 15 seconds. But that initial kill of simply the skinny dipper going out, for a dip one night as she's the first person to officially be taken out by the shark.
Yeah, and it's just a cool and iconic scene. I mean, one, it's like, she's basically nude because you see her taking off her clothes and running into this water naked and stuff like that. And, it's that first time you get to see something, you hear the dunk dump and the woo and her getting pulled under. And I love the fact that, you don't get to see the shark. I mean, and you don't even see any of that stuff. I'm like, the shark doesn't even make an appearance in this movie until like 45 minutes, almost an hour into this movie, even though you've seen references and there's other things where it appears, but you don't really actually get a chance to see it, which is, in part, he didn't, Spielberg didn't want to keep overly using it just because the fact that it is a animatronic, so you kind of lose some of that luster if you see it all the time. But I always thought that scene, that scene in the beginning is just an iconic scene. Like I said, so many people have used that. I mean, that was kind of the backdrop of the poster with, the jaws underneath and her swimming and stuff like that. And it's just cool. It's just a cool scene. And like, I read about where like they had her. It's kind of a torturous scene too, because they have the actress on two pulleys, and they're literally yanking the shit out of her, going left and right to get her to, to violently get back and forth through this water to emulate an actual shark attack. But yeah, it's such cool. You have that one. You have the going left and right to get her to, to violently get back and forth through this water to emulate an actual shark attack. But yeah, it's such cool. You have that one. You have the scene where the little boy gets killed. He's on his little raft thingy, and he gets killed by the shark. And it just, this whole movie is like, it is a very, obviously it's a shark movie, it's a horror movie, but it also talks about like the politics of like just towns. The sheriff is telling, hey man, we need to shut down this town, man. They shut these beaches off, and they're like, we can't do that. That's how this town makes its money. It's a tourist town. The X amount of months a year that it's open basically makes enough money so this town can survive on the other months where nobody other than the islanders or the people who live on this island, that your people who live there all the time, the 24/7 guys, that's how they make their money, is this little time where 2 or 3 months where it's the busy season and they come in and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah man, no, we're not shutting this down. And and it just takes, it's basically just kind of like the politics of all that, where it's like, no, and then every time something bad happens, it's like, come on man, like seriously, we need to shut this shit down. And then it's like, eventually when they decide to shut down or do anything, by that time it's too late.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like that. And it's, it's like that old classic situation in horror movies, where nobody believes, the victim, or nobody believes the hero, or however that movie particularly plays out. But it's usually that same kind of thing where it's like, yeah, nobody believes them until it's too late, and then it's like, well, I told you so, but I shouldn't have needed to say I told you so, because now we're all dying. But no, it's always been a really cool movie. I've always greatly enjoyed it, even for a movie like back in the 70s that in retrospect to movies nowadays doesn't quite have like certain budgets and certain ability to be super crisp and clean. The thing I actually really like about the movie is it is very well shot. It's very thought out, and it actually does work for that time, because especially, the scenes are bright enough to show and understand that people are at the beach and this dangerous situation is happening. But then as we move forward into when the hunting begins, it's got more of that kind of grittiness to it, where it's like, candlelight is more of a thing. You're not going to have that perfect lighting all the time, but you don't lose any of the aesthetic when it comes to the movie. It's still incredibly aesthetically pleasing, and you can understand what's going on in those scenes. But I just love the way the movie's shot.
Yeah. I mean, especially like I said, especially at the night, or even like when that one of the first times you finally get to see the shark. I mean, like I said, when you see this movie, especially with, like I said, with technology getting better and better and better and better, obviously when you see the shark, Bruce, as they named him, you see him and he is pretty big and bulky and kind of generic, and he looks really, really horrible, and it's fake the whole entire time. But still, even watching this movie, 50 years later after this movie's already come out, when Brody is chumming the water and he comes out at that first time, that part still startles the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because it's coming, when it's coming, but you always forget when you're watching it when he's actually gonna pop out of the water. And when he pops out of the water, you go like, "Oh shit, yeah, holy crap!" And it's such a cool concept. On the way they filmed this movie is like it's a lot of like underwater things and stuff like that. Like Spielberg was like doing a lot of the view of the ocean, and like you see like the people who are swimming in the water, you see their feet, and it's like he uses a lot of these like cool technologies and stuff like that, and shooting in these angles that at the time a lot of directors weren't really doing. So getting down and getting gritty and getting dirty in these movies and stuff like that. So yeah, I love it. Like just that scene, and then obviously when as soon as he sees the shark, he's chumming the water. Obviously he backs up, and then we get the one of this movie has a ton of iconic lines, gritty and getting dirty in these movies and stuff like that. So yeah, I love it. Like just that scene, and then obviously when as soon as he sees the shark, he's chumming the water. Obviously he backs up, and then we get the one of this movie has a ton of iconic lines in this movie, but it's probably the biggest one. Yeah, he backs up and he goes, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, you're like thinking, cause like, yeah, they got, you got the college kind of study guy who knows all about sharks that comes in, which is Richard Dreyfuss's character. And then you have Quint, who's the town fisherman, who's a shark wrangler. He always, he knows all about sharks and stuff like that. And so you got the other guys, and then you got the sheriff, Brody, we talked about, who it's funny, he's a sheriff for a town that's surrounded by water, and they even make a joke on it that he's not a water person. He doesn't like being on the water. And he's like, "Well, that doesn't make no sense. You're surrounded by water. You're in an island." He's like, "Well, it depends on how you look at it." He's like, "I'm still on land," and obviously him trying to get him onto the boats, is always fun, But yeah, I just the whole just those trio in this movie just are what really makes this movie sell, is those three, and then just their ability to deal or not deal with Jaws.
But no, absolutely, bro. And that's the thing I just think is like also really, really cool about that, situation as well, is so many one-liners, so many classic things. And also there's a little bit of humor that also gets spliced in as well. So like, getting to the point where like the main cast as far as like the battle or the hunt goes, is Quint, Hooper and Brody. And, we've already established, you're going to need a bigger boat, and, Brody has brought in these like experts or these people that are more familiar with marine life in order to like help him with this situation. But there's also that really great scene of like bonding where they're literally getting like drunk one night and they're just singing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's just that scene always is probably my favorite. One of my favorite parts of the movie, where they're just like, they're all just getting shit faced drunk. They're between the two people who, beginning of this movie, well, not beginning, when they first get introduced with each other with Quentin Hooper, they're two polar opposite sides, because, Quentin is, the old school shark hunter who was, a military guy. He talks about his, him being, at the Indianapolis when all that came down and all that kind of stuff. So, he's like that, where this, he sees this, you know, the Hooper's character is like this young, wet behind the ears, kind of like rich college kid kind of like thing, where yeah, he hadn't like he hadn't paid his hand. He even makes fun of his hands. His hands are not calloused. He hasn't worked a day. He had money counting hands. So those two are like constantly bickering and kind of battling against each other throughout this whole movie, like in a fun kind of way. Like nothing really super major, but like they're just kind of like doing it. And then they kind of bond over alcohol and stories about how they've gotten scars on their bodies.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it actually is kind of funny because even that reminds me, since we had talked earlier about Kevin Smith, even kind of reminds me a little bit of that scene in Chasing Amy where they're at like, the gay club and, Brody, ironically enough, and Alyssa is doing that having that conversation about like sexual encounters that left lasting effects, which I just think is like super duper funny and stuff like that. But as we get into the actual like hunting of it, I mean, it becomes like pretty intense. It's a pretty insane like climax of this movie. And I know our fangs, are used to us talking a lot in depth of certain movies and stuff like that are applicable. But with Jaws, it is a very straightforward concept. I mean, everything is really laid out in just a proper way, where it's like, oh, well, they didn't really get into that. They didn't get into this, but there's not a lot to get into that. It's like, look, you're introduced to the first victim. You're introduced to the town that this is having an issue with the two authority figures of not understanding, like, look, we need to put public safety first. And then you've got like the mayor guy who's like, no, dude, I think not. We need to put the economy first. And then it leads into Brody basically kind of renegating it and being like, look, man, if you're not going to help me, I'm going to find people that will, kind of a thing. So I always like to put that out just to clarify a little bit that we're not breezing through a movie. It just really does have a pretty traditional concept when it comes to that. We might have the opportunity later in line to break down the actual franchise more, where you actually do get more backstory of the actual family. But that will not be today as we continue on with Jaws itself. And when they're getting into the hunt, the other thing I like is where they start tying things in similar, but in very interesting ways. So we've already established that after Brody, is chumming the water and realizes just how large Jaws is, you also get that scene where they use the spear guns to attach like barrels to Jaws as a marker. But they just don't understand, at least not right away, the strength behind the shark, where those barrels are literally used to keep an animal in, not only as a marker for vision, because you see the barrels, they're close, but also to keep them from really getting overly far, because they're air barrels, they're huge and they're meant to stay above the water. But Jaws just pulls those things under, and he's like, you guys can't stop me. I'm going to go where I please.
Yeah, because that's what you're talking about. Yeah, those barrels are meant to kind of keep them from diving too deep, too. Getting too deep, getting too far away, and stuff like that. Where yeah, most sharks aren't. Once you have a barrel on you, you those things, it's almost impossible. Where yet in the movie he takes that barrel and goes underneath the boat, and he's like, where the hell did he go? And then realizes he's underneath the boat and kind of attacks them from kind of underneath a little bit too. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it is cool, especially 'cause, like when you see like the size of how big of a shark he is. They're talking about him being like a 25, 26 foot shark, which most sharks are. They were talking about like the average ones that you see every so often are your 16 to 18 foot sharks. So this one is like massively huge compared to some of the other ones. So it's like, yeah, you start thinking, hell yeah, they do need a bigger boat because Jesus Christ, the shark is about the same size as this boat. And when he's ramming it and he's taking the boat down and all that, you kind of go, oh my God, but it doesn't really get hardcore into seeing the size of them until the boat is almost started capsizing a little bit more and it starts going into the water and you see Jaws kind of jump onto the boat and kind of is like partly on the boat and you just see the size of him and then that's where unfortunately Quint can't hold on and gets kind of put into the Jaws's mouth and gets chomped around. I love it. It's a cool scene. It's like, the way they shot it was really interesting because it's like you have people inside the Jaws that are kind of pulling him through, but they shot it so beautifully and kind of so rapidly that you really can't tell that there are animatronics and people inside the shark kind of doing all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just I just love that that whole entire thing. And then as I I'm pondering stupid stuff when I watch these movies is they were gonna pay Quint like he wanted like 70 some $1,000 to get this shark or something ridiculous at that time. Is like I think it was like $300,000 or something like that. How much money now? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, now that Quint has died, does the town still owe him that kind of money, or do they still got to pay him? Or
I think that's one of those. I think we can safely say no when it comes to that one. But also, you know, even the death of Quint, for example, is honestly about the bloodiest that this movie gets. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a minimal kill count when it comes to this movie. There's only about 5 kills, but you don't get, they don't make it a blood fest. There was an old saying that I saw in a movie once that's a a little bit of blood can make a big cloud when it comes to water, and it's kind of that way where like there are these other kills of Jaws getting their victims, but they only really use blood as like an enhancement color. Even with Quint, they do amp it up a little bit because you're actually really watching this guy getting eaten alive by the shark. He's spitting up blood a bit because he's basically got him through the legs and through the abdomen. But even then, I thought it was very, very proper for the style of movie when it comes to this. And we've had a million conversations about like bloodlust and stuff when it comes to movies. But I thought it was very cool about the way the blood was used in this particular movie as a more well thought out enhancement color, even in proper deaths where it's like, okay, again, this guy's being eaten alive. We're watching him getting eaten alive. So we're going to have to, amp it a little bit. We have to make it realistic. There was a movie I remember watching recently that just kind of made me laugh a bit because I'm watching it, and for certain bites, things involving, it was a vampire movie, there just wasn't the blood that should come out from like a bite to the neck. And I just remember looking at it and be like, that's so unrealistic. Like, how is somebody biting somebody's neck, sucking out their blood, and then taking their mouth off with like a clean mouth? Just doesn't work that way. But anyway, I like the way it was designed in this movie. I thought they thought it out well. I thought they planned it very well. And I thought it definitely made sense when it came to how it was used.
yeah, that's the cool thing about this movie. I mean, like I said, I understand, obviously this movie came out in the mid-'70s. So, the rating boards and the movies being done like are different than how how they're done now. So that's why, it's kind of interesting with this, like you said. I mean, even though it is a violent movie, it's considered a horror film. It's really not that, like I said, there's really not that much blood. It's just mainly for, like I said, you see a little bit of, when the kid gets killed in the raft, you kind of see a little bit of blood around the water and stuff like that. Obviously, like I said, the most violent, like you said, most violent scene in the movie, other than the climax, is Quentin being eaten, and it's even that, like you said, is kind of done kind of nice where it's not hardcore graphic or anything super crazy, but I mean, like I said, I always love that because like you said, you have to. It's a shark movie. It's about a shark eating people, so it's got that horrific part of it. But it's actually, it which is funny because it's like the movie itself isn't that scary as far as that. I think it's just the fact that it's based on a sort of a true story where you're in the waters and the oceans and there's sharks in the oceans and people get mad when or get hate sharks, and you have all these people that go around killing sharks. Even in this movie, the whole I'm gonna pay X amount of money. The mom's like, I'm gonna pay blah 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 kind of money for anybody who kills the shark because the shark killed my son, kind of thing. Well, and it's like, I get it. As a parent, your loved one just got eaten by a shark, but then again, you're allowing your kid to swim in waters that belongs to the shark, doesn't belong to you. So that's why I always loved about that, where it's like, and especially within this movie, you know what I mean? It's just one of those movies where ultimately, it's probably one of my favorite shark movies of all time. I think the only one that for me that comes kind of close, um, as far as shark movies, is a movie that came out probably like 10, 15 years ago called Open Water, which
Yeah.
was pretty cool. And the reason why I liked that, and I really didn't really like it that much until I found out later on, which, this movie is an independent film. It's all the actors are no-name actors, and it's obviously about, people being attacked by sharks, and they're literally putting these actors out in the ocean with real sharks.
Yeah.
They were real sharks. They had nets and stuff like that to kind of keep them away from them to a certain extent. But it's something that with the liabilities and stuff like that, it's crazy. Even at that time when that movie came out, it's still nuts that they were able to get away with that. Because like you would never be able to do that in Hollywood. You'd never be able to get like Tom Cruise out in the middle of there's not enough insurance in the world to ensure that he's not going to get killed or eaten by a shark, and like I said, you can go with sharks and saying like this and stuff like that. I mean, like I said, I'm a huge Shark Week person, and you have Paul Gelder, who is a huge shark person, who was a Marine and got bit by a shark, got his arm and his leg taken off, and people go, you would think someone like him would be so anti-shark, but he's all about preserving and saving sharks. And people go, well, they bit your arm. It's like, but I was in their territory. You know what I mean? They were doing what they do naturally. I'm the one that disrupted their nature. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't hold any grudge against any of those sharks. They were doing what they do. That's what they do. They're especially a great white, they're apex predators. There's a reason why they've lasted millions of years and involved, and they're probably one of the greatest killing machines on the planet, just because all they do, literally, like even in this movie, they even say all they do is swim and eat.
No,
That's
absolutely. 100%, brother. And actually, I like the way that you put that. I like the way you worded that. So actually, let's kind of roll with that. What do you think personally about the fact that such a killing machine and the focal point of the movie is literally on the movie for 4 minutes?
Yeah, that's the cool thing about this movie was like, for a movie being about a shark, and and the shark killing and people, and like the movie's Jaws, it's all about a killer shark. He if Jaws was an actor, I don't think he would have got a SAG card because he hadn't been in the movie long enough. Like you literally only see him, legitimately in the movie, and it's cool that they kind of splice it with the animatronics, and then sometimes when you got like the underwater kind of views, they spliced it in with a real actual shark. So it's like it's crazy, which it's cool that they did it, but then again, it's like when you see the real shark that's kind of moving around is nowhere near the size of what the shark is supposed to be. So I thought that's kind of funny, but I still like the fact that they did, like splice some of that stuff. But yeah, for you know your main person, your main villain. I mean, look at a horror. What other horror? Imagine Michael Myers being in the movie for 4 minutes.
Right.
Imagine Freddy Krueger being in a movie for 4 minutes. Imagine Hellraiser being. Oh wait, yeah, he's been in a couple movies where he's only in the movies for 4 minutes, and that's the reason why those ones sucked.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Jason, there's a lot of them where you don't get that like antagonist, that main focal point as like a main thing. But again, yeah, I do think it works well for this movie where I wouldn't hate to have gotten more shark personally, but at the same time, I do actually find that this movie and screenplay was very well written. So like you don't get into what we would typically call action, you know, for really about an hour. You get your kills, and you get a few people taken out in that time. But as far as like what you would traditionally call, horror action or things like that, you really don't get it for an hour. You and I often refer to that as the slow burn, but it doesn't really apply in this particular fashion, which I always find very interesting and also very cool because it's like, you know what? It shows that you can be entertained in a movie before it really revs itself up. And I think that was very cool. And as we get to the end of the movie, one of the things that Quint was doing while trying to save his own life is obviously he's trying to stab Jaws. He's got his giant machete. He's got like the spear. He's jamming things in its mouth, which, to try to stop him from eating him. And one of those things happens to be basically the main weapon of the movie, which was an air tank for scuba diving that he just jams in there to try to stop him from biting him and whatnot. And that basically ended up turning into, the bomb that killed Jaws, where Brody is basically up on the top of the mast. The ship is long since sinking, and he's trying to get his licks in, and he ends up shooting the air tank, which actually ends up blowing Jaws up and deheading him. And he ends up finding that Hooper. He reconnects with Hooper, who was kind of hiding in the water while all this was going on. And that's basically as they're paddling back to shore. That is how the movie ends. But what did you think of the way that they took out Jaws?
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. I mean, again, another part of this movie being iconic and being in pop culture. They did it on Mythbusters, where they were talking about could shooting an air tank, cause enough pressure to blow it up. I mean, obviously they tried to recreate it, but it was actually considered a fail. But anyway, I like that. I mean, and I love how you mentioned that. Yeah, Hooper, who was decided to go, okay, I'm going to go into a shark cage and do this, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm one for going in. That's one of my big bucket lists is to go into a shark tank and shark cage and go down in the water and have sharks come at you and all that good stuff like that. But yeah, with the shark that they saw the size of that one, there is no way I would ever be getting into a tank like a cage like that. I mean, and if you see in this movie, yeah, he just decimates this cage in like record time. I mean, it's just basically like, oh my god. And then he escapes, kind of goes down. He's got oxygen tank, and you really don't see him for the rest of this movie until the shark gets blown up. And I would love to have like a movie, like a short movie, like it'd be like a 5-minute movie about what the hell Hooper was doing the whole entire time that all this shit was going down. Like he's just chilling in the bottom of the ocean, just looking up and going, okay, there's the shark going after him again. Okay, yeah. Oh, he got blown up. Cool. Now I can come up.
It's safe.
It's safe. It's safe now for me because I'm not gonna move. Which I mean, I don't blame him.
Yeah.
Obviously the Jaws completely forgot about him completely because he didn't go after him. He was just like, oh shit, I'm just gonna go after this guy on the boat now instead. Which like you said, it's a good tactic. Just to hide down there, and I mean until your air runs out, and then eventually you're gonna have to make a decision. But luckily enough, Brody knows how to shoot an air tank and blows up Jaws, and you had that cool. It's just a cool scene, like them just going into millions and millions of pieces, and then like you said, then them having to row themselves back to with the floaties and stuff like that back to that, and you see all the the details of like what people had to do when they were making this movie was if you blow up a huge giant whale or a huge giant shark, there's going to be parts of it just floating on the water. And anybody that knows anything about dead carcasses on the water, the seagulls love that shit. And you see the seagulls just having a good old time with that. I
Yep.
mean, as big of a shark that was, yeah, that's gonna be feeding the wildlife. The only problem is, most times sharks tend to usually be cannibalistic. If there's a dead shark, that they will eat on a dead shark or eat on a dead whale or whatever like that. So what you probably did was probably just ring the dinner bell for maybe not as big a shark as Jaws was, but you're probably gonna get 10 or 20 of them now, six, smaller sharks, but now you got to deal with 20 sharks instead of one shark.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so before we get into the obituaries, brother, I wanted to have a small segment where we talk about sequels. So because the funny thing is, this movie came out in in the mid 70s, and I ended up seeing and I saw this movie in class about 10 or so years later, and the thing I remember being after I saw it, despite the fact that I loved it, was being so pissed because I was like, wait. Again, you have to keep in mind I'm a little vamp at this time. They blew off Jaws's head, and I was well aware by that time that not only was there a sequel, there were multiple sequels. So there was this part of me that's like, wait, how can you thoroughly blow something to pieces and end its life in a vicious way and then have it return? And again, look, it makes sense. Just because you have one giant shark doesn't mean that there's nothing but little sharks in the rest of the world. And also doesn't necessarily mean that this giant shark birthed more giant sharks. But it does also play out a little bit like we mentioned before about the family history in the franchise. But what were your thoughts about the fact that they clearly, blew up Jaws and it still spawned 3 sequels?
Well, I mean, that just goes to show, that, when they wrote this movie, Jesus fucking Christ, people need to fucking leave me the fuck alone. Goddamn spammers, don't call you until you're recording. Wait, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, you're good.
Okay. So anyway, yeah, before we got spammed.
So rudely interrupted.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about these movies that when they made this movie, I don't think that they were particularly thinking of at the time they were probably thinking of any sequels or any of that kind of stuff like that. But then how much money this movie made and how big it came and how much of an iconic thing this came, they were like, hey man, let's just keep the money train rolling. And unfortunately, that money train stopped with the first one. Unfortunately, even though, like I said, I mean there were 4 Jaws movies. 2 is okay. It's still a fun movie. I personally think the third one is my favorite one, other than the first Jaws.
You and me both, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I love Jaws 3. I love the 3D aspect of it. Yes, it's cheesy and campy, but that's the 80s for you. And then and then the unspeakable Jaws 4 that none of us like to talk about. The only saving aspect of the Jaws 4 was bringing the mom back, the original actress that played the mother in Jaws. But yeah, I mean, as I said, it was like, why not, like, this huge entity, why not try to make sequels? And it just goes to show you that just because you can, you might not need to do it. You shouldn't do it sometimes. And I mean, it learned out. And I mean, luckily after 4, they decided that they jumped the shark already as the coin is turned, and didn't make any more. But that didn't stop Hollywood from making like 9 gazillion shark movies. Like I said, from everything from Sharknado to Deep Blue Sea to the Megalodon to Dark Water to Open Waters. I mean, literally, there is probably, of all movies that have ever been done, there are probably more shark movies than anything else in the horror genre. I mean, there are probably like, 400,000 shark movies out there right now in the world. And it's just one of those ones that, like, and if there's 4,000 of them, there's 3,999 too many of them for the most part. Most of them are really, really cheesy. Most of them are horrible. Not necessarily meaning cheesy is bad, because I am a fan of the Sharknado series. I think Sharknado brought
I am too.
Yeah, I thought Sharknado brought the absurdity to a level where it was fun and it was over the top, but in a good way. But yeah, like I said, like, I mean, if you look at, like, you look at, probably, I would say between sharks and dinosaurs are probably the main two that have probably been done more times in horror movies than anything else.
I mean, dude, he's had it on display. I have the movies in my collection, but our good friend John Kozik knows of the Ouija Shark series, of which they've done 2 of those. I will say, like you had mentioned, Open Water. When it comes to movies outside of Jaws, I do enjoy Deep Blue Sea. I haven't seen the other ones. I've heard they're not that great, but I did enjoy the first Deep Blue Sea. I thought it was kind of cool. I liked the idea of these scientists specifically, studying sharks and stuff like that. So I did enjoy that one. And I will say I did enjoy, there's so many Megalodon movies, just like you said. It's pretty insane. You've got like Sharktopus and, Sharkmadon versus, Octozilla type craziness as well. But that first The Meg movie with Jason Statham, I actually thought was pretty good. So as far as a higher budget, more money to spend movie, I did enjoy that movie. I thought it was pretty cool. I do also enjoy Jason's work, so there's probably a little bit of nostalgia there. But as far as movies outside of Jaws, yeah, Sharknado, I'm right there with you, because I just love that Troma-esque absurdity that both of us love, that full moon feel. And then I did enjoy the first Deep Blue Sea and the first Meg. I did think that those were pretty cool. And I again, also kind of funny when we were talking about sequels, is for whatever reason, when you and I were, staying at the Buffalo Bill house, Mrs. Vamp really wanted to watch Jaws Revenge for some reason. And I remember you looking at me and being like, Vamp, really? And I'm like, Devil, it's not my fault, dude. She loves Jaws, and for some reason, she watches Jaws Revenge a lot.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm a huge shark, fanatic. Like I said, Shark Week is probably my favorite week out of the whole entire year, other than, like, maybe Halloween and maybe Mardi Gras or something like that, or any time I have to sacrifice some virgins or something like that. It's probably my favorite time of the week. But yeah, I mean, Shark Week is awesome. So, but yeah, it's just like, out of all the Jaws movies, to watch, yeah, Jaws 4 is just one of those ones that it's like, yeah, it's just bad. I mean,
Yeah.
Is it as bad as some of the some, like you said, some of these, like, shark versus shark that and shark this and shark that and shark that? Nah, it's not nearly as bad as some of those. But yeah, it's still pretty bad. And like I said, it's to the point where, like I said, Jaws 1 made a shit ton of money. Jaws 2 made okay money. Jaws 3 didn't do very well, unlike, like I said, even though me and you love Jaws 3.
We love Jaws 3, but Jaws 3 tried.
Yeah. And then Jaws 4 made even less money, and I at least applaud them for not trying to do a fifth Jaws. They're like, let's just kill it before we you know, make Jaws 47, or like they say in Back to the Future, what was it, like Jaws like
Like
38 or
18 or
something,
something.
something like that. I mean that basically, even that itself is part of the joke of they've made so many Jaws movies that sucked that even Back to the Future is making a reference to Jaws about how many damn sequels they have.
And Marty says just shark still looks fake.
Yeah. With the 3D dimensional shark coming out of him.
Granted, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
I would have loved that to have happened to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing of like the old theaters like that. Yeah, I would have liked that, something like that, or even like the old school like theaters that used to do like the the horror movies, and they would have like stuff going in the zip lines and the shocking your seats and stuff like that. I mean, it'd be cool to do to get something up like that. But yeah, like I said, it's just. I mean, even like I said, we're talking about Back to the Future. It's like again, Jaws and the Jaws movies are just ingrained in pop culture and
Yeah.
will always be. It's like, like I said, it's here it is like, 50, almost 50 years later, and we're still talking about Jaws and still talking about Bruce and still talking about Spielberg, even though, that was when Spielberg was good, in my opinion. Some of the stuff Spielberg does now is not, but that's for another topic.
Absolutely. And Richard Dreyfuss does work the con circuit. So
Yep.
any of our beloved fangs that are out there, any of our beloved Infernos and fangs that are out there that want to meet our Jaws fans, Richard does do the con circuit. So he's definitely out there to meet. Well, let's jump into the obituaries, my friend. Why don't we start it off with you, man? How do you look at Jaws? I mean, I know that we both hold it in pretty high regard, but how are you looking at it numbers wise on the obituaries?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, I put this movie. I mean, even with just not aesthetically looking at it now, like I said, when you watch it now, it's not nearly as epic and as oh my god as it was back when when you were a kid watching this movie or when it came out. But it's still one of those movies that like I don't like I said I can watch this movie a million times. It's just so fun. It's just and like I said, it's such a for being such I mean, in other terms, it's such a basic movie. Like you said, it just goes from point A to point B, point C, point D, point E. Just it's a very linear movie. Like I said, it's weird that we're talking about this movie and people have talked about this movie. But yeah, I mean, it's literally shark shows up, town figures it out, town doesn't want to do anything. Someone's gonna do something. Shark attacks. Death. I mean, it's literally like it's such a point A to point B. Like I said, it's such a crazy movie that most movies that work that linear tend not to work because it's just that there's not too much story behind this. You really don't know very much about anything about the shark. You don't know anything about this family other than the fact that they just moved to Amityville. You really don't know anything about this town per se, other than the fact that it's a town that regulates on these holiday, on these summer months and makes their money. Other than that, you really don't know. You know very little about Quint, other than the little bit that he talks about his life. Hooper's character, a little bit about, but it's very small. It's just a very like straightforward movie, which normally I'm all about like a very good story and depthness and all this kind of stuff. But it's in the end it's about a fucking 26-foot killer shark.
Yeah.
How in depth do you really need it to get? It's about a shark that kills fucking people. Its motivation is it's fucking hungry. That's literally it. Like there's no rhyme or reason to any of that. But like I said, I always put this movie in high regards because of you know I mean, like I said, it probably is the movie that got me, or at least maybe not the first Jaws, because like I said, I grew up maybe with the third Jaws, seeing that and seeing stuff like that. But yeah, it's made me love sharks and made me get interested in sharks, even though it kind of portrays sharks sort of in a bad way.
Yeah.
But then again, it shows people being in a bad way and how the government does stuff and how that town does bad shit too. But yeah, for me, it's always gonna be in high regard. So for me, I'm giving this an 8.0.
Cool, man. No, honestly, we won't need to meet in the middle on this one, buddy. I'm totally right there with you. I think it's great. I love the simplicity of the storyline. We talked about that earlier. I just like the fact that while, yes, it takes a second to get into what we would call action, it it made proper use of its time and explaining certain things without needing to go into major detail. Look, when it came to the history of like Brody's family, sure, it touched on that in the other movies as well. But I like the fact that they kept it a very simple concept. Like you said, first victim goes down, but that's just a great drawing aspect of the movie. But you're learning about the town. You learn about these characters. Yes, this is the town. This is how the town operates. There's this internal struggle between two high-profile figures that don't see eye to eye. One of the high-profile figures decides to take it into his own hands, hires the mercenaries, so to speak, and then go and do the hunting, and they win. Not everybody survives, but they win. I'm definitely with you, man. I like the way it's done. I think it's well executed. I think it's very proper. I love the fact it's had a long-lasting event on pop culture, and I think an 8 is a way to go. I think that when you look at it visually and compare it to what movies do now, is irrelevant simply due to the fact that, of course, technology evolves, and that's just the way it is. Like, yeah, the way a shark comes out and destroys a person in maybe the Meg is of course going to be different than the way that somebody was killed in Jaws. The Meg came out in the 2000s. The Jaws came out 30 years before that. So it's just kind of the way that those things work out. But I think it's still just a great movie. It's so fun. I've watched it a million times like you have. I'll watch it a million more. I think it's just the way to go. And I think it does deserve overall the proper respect when it comes to that movie. And I just think it's super cool. I mean, even the poster itself, as simplistic as it is, just like when you talked about the theme, everybody knows that visual of the shark coming straight up to the girl that's just swimming. Like, everybody knows that image. You don't even have to have the words Jaws on there. Everybody's gonna know exactly what that is. And I think there's staying power to that, and I think it's important for stuff like that to get acknowledged. So I'm right there with you, brother. When it comes to myself, when it comes to the devil, 8.0 and 8 on the obituaries is what we are going to give 1975's Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg. We appreciate you, Fangs. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
I think if there's anybody who would know hot things, it's you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's only right that you let our beloved Fangs know what they can order now, courtesy of Coney Island.
Oh, yeah, man. We're in the kitchen. It gets hot in the kitchen. And what else better for your finger foods, for your tacos, for your victims that you may be eating? Maybe some sauce. And you should get it from the sauce boss. Coney Island sauce. Oh, yeah. Get some of that good stuff. Oh, yeah. You like to sprinkle it on anything. You could sprinkle it on your fingers. Sprinkle it on your toes. Sprinkle it on your hose. Anything you want to sprinkle goes.
Absolutely. We have partnered with Coney Island Saucery. Aaron is fantastic. We really appreciate all the love he's given to the show, and we're very, very pleased and honored to be a part of him. So he's got 4 sauces out of various heat levels to enjoy on all your various foods, but also for anybody who is already following his socials, our socials, or is about to be, newly announced partnership with Slayer.
Oh yeah.
Coney Island
burning to fire.
Oh yeah, Coney Island Saucery does have a Slayer brand hot sauce coming out very, very soon. And so make sure that you check that out for all your various levels of spice. This is Vampire and the Devil, Coney Island Saucery. Horns up. Fangs out.
Hey, what's up? It's the devil here again with another one of those kooky 80s horror comedies that you love. This time we're gonna talk about my demon lover. Ooh yeah. Do you have a demon lover? Maybe it's yours truly, the devil. Anyway, this movie is really kooky and crazy and has all those cool effects that you love. It's so cheesy. It's about a demon who gets horny, and when he gets horny, he gets even hornier and becomes this demon. Ooh, you should go and check it out. If you like rom-com horror comedies, check it out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape Munster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you Fangs and Infernos are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
And fangs. You know what time it is? We're here. Vampire and Devil here with you. We are going to have a very unique showdown that we're going to discuss. Wouldn't you say, my friend, as we're going to pit some franchises against each other.
Oh yeah, we were thinking instead of doing individual movies versus individual movies, we're going to do a little bit of franchising and talk about movies that we want to, with that franchises that we like. And, we kind of wanted to keep them very similar, or at least to the point where it's not like a franchise that has three versus like, Nightmare on Elm Street or Freddy Krueger that's got like 972 of them. So, we definitely wanted to keep it kind of drastically close. So, obviously, we're going to do ones that we love, and it kind of came out pretty exactly how I thought it would be. Of course, I love Poltergeist and ghosts and demons and things like that. And of course, why wouldn't Salem pick a movie about a Ouija board?
Absolutely. As if we didn't know that was going to happen. 100%. But yes, Fangs, we are going to pit Poltergeist as chosen by the devil against Witchboard as chosen by the vampire, and that's how we're going to talk about it. And then we will pit our overall thoughts and overall obituary kill ratings per franchise versus per franchise. Keep changing it up just a little bit on you guys, but you guys have been with us. You guys have been riding the flames and drinking the blood. You know how we roll, and we tend to stick to a pretty solid, style that you guys have become accustomed to. So why don't we jump right into it, my friend? Let's talk a little bit about Poltergeist. Poltergeist has always been such a killer series. The movie in particular, the first one, has always been held in such high regard from, not only the casting, the props that were used, if you want to call them props, the certain one-liners, catchphrases, as you will, all the way down to the potential on whether or not this is also a cursed franchise. So there's definitely a lot of cool little things that we can dive into when it comes to the Poltergeist franchise. But we'll start it right off, though, man. We got Poltergeist 1, 1982, Toby Hopper.
Yeah. That's what I said. I love the fact that that's a Tobe Hooper movie. I love, like I said, you go, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and some of these, iconic horror films that he's done, and then you have Poltergeist, which is people go, really? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, it's if you watch this movie and just think of the logistics of this movie, it's pretty horrific and pretty crazy, It's one of those things that's like, you, one of those movies that, like, when you watch it, it's a lot more crazier and psychological horror almost versus, like, but he always has his tricks and up his sleeves and his gags that's gonna come and get you. And there's some scenes in this movie that are definitely memorable as far as, like, scaring the shit out of you when you were a wee little lad in the early 80s.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. I mean, it's really crazy when it comes to this movie, but like it's for a horror movie with damn near no kills, but the whole premise though of the movie is possession. It stems solely around this family in their house that was built on an ancient Indian burial ground, and possession, corpses, demons, and of course, as the phrase goes, poltergeists that are, infiltrating the houses, speaking to Heather O'Rourke's, Carol Ann character, through the TV, and, messing with the lights, voices, all that kind of stuff that you would be used to when it comes to a paranormal style movie, as well as, very interesting things like even the props that were used, like skeletons in certain scenes, which are actual real skeletons. And the funny thing about it is it's actually, especially for movies made at that time, even though people wouldn't really think of it like that, it's actually more cost effective for low budget movies to actually go to a medical supply store and get real skeletons as opposed to paying to have skeleton props made, which I've always found that to be pretty interesting. It makes sense when you sit down and think of it, but I do kind of feel like the first time you would hear something like that, you'd be like, there's no way. Like, there's no way that real human bone could be cheaper than, like, styrofoam.
Yeah, it's crazy. I guess, like, I guess the prop person in this movie, something happened. Yeah, something, they just got lost or they didn't do it or something. Yeah, so it's like, well, we need skeletons in this movie. Yeah, let's just call up our local mortuary or student, place like that, medical supply, and just let's bring some real dead creatures, which makes it even creepier. The fact that you have these actors that are, like, especially in this movie, with dealing with these corpses, and it's one thing when you're dealing with, like, like you said, a fake prop that's plastic or fiberglass or something like that, versus this, these skeletons that are actual real human remains. That makes it even worse. I mean, I guess, like, a lot of it wasn't even told to the actors until after the fact that they were already in the scenes with them. So it made it work, because you got to realize, man, most people are, take aside from, like, the creepiness of it, there's a lot of the religious aspects of it, of desecrating someone's body or something like that, and using it for entertainment purposes and stuff like that. But yeah, that's what's crazy about this movie. This movie overall has this, like, just so many weird things about it. Like, it's such an 80s movie. I mean, the whole premise of this movie is, like, the TV, after 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and they play the national anthem, goes onto the blank white screen that, like, kids nowadays have no ideas what that is, because TVs and streaming services are going 24/7 now. Channels do not have, dead time like they used to do. So you couldn't even do this movie. It wouldn't make no sense of like, why is this white screen? What is this white screen? Like,
No.
yeah, that's what we had. When you were watching your NBC or PBS and it got to a certain time and you fell asleep, you usually woke up to the TV going, and you were like, oh shit, yep. Where nowadays, like I said, you sleep on a channel now and yeah, it's still playing. It's 24/7 loop. There's always something on your tube now. But yeah, that's the crazy thing about this movie. And like I said, and then you get this, you get that in this movie where yeah, it's she starts playing around with the ghost a little bit and the poltergeist, and they're being friendly. But that's I always joke about this, with this movie is like, if you're inside a house, right, and your kitchen chairs are getting put into weird positionings, or your little daughter is getting slid across the kitchen floor. As funny as that might seem, I am getting the fuck out of the house because that is not normal. I don't care. I don't care how friendly Casper is. You never know exactly what's gonna happen. It's the same thing with like, when we go into the Witchboard, and we talk about Witchboard. You never know, you might be talking to a good person, or you might be talking to a bad person who's just pretending to be a good person for a little bit. And that's kind of like what Poltergeist was, they were playful and cheerful and got you to, to open yourself up a little bit more. And then eventually it's like, hey, remember, it's like that, I'm gonna come and get you, I'm gonna get you now.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, there's also the crazy scene with the mom where she's like, flying around the bedroom and busting up lamps and busting up furniture and just, crawling across the ceiling like not Exorcist style. She's just being like dragged across the ceiling and flung around. It's really crazy. And then we touched on it a little bit in the intro too, where just there's so much craziness about this movie too, about this franchise that also plays into the real lives of, the actors and actresses as well. One of which that was very, interesting, and of course nobody would have expected it, and everybody, from everything I've heard about the people that worked on the film, performed on the films and stuff, is that everybody adored Heather and loved her so much. But it's so kind of crazy that, like, for example, the TV that, is on the snow blindness or the snowstorm or, blankness is on channel 12, and that also happens to be the age that Heather passed away at, due to illness, which is really unfortunate. But, just so many little things like that, but also so many different actors and actresses that became really well known, not only with the way that they acted and performed in this movie, but even from the things that, were said and lines that were used, like "this house is clean."
Yeah. That's just crazy. I mean, it's cool. Like a lot of people, like, like they talk about the cursed films, and other places and other TV shows have talked about it. And whether or not you want to believe that the Poltergeist franchise was cursed, I mean, some people thought it was. I mean, when we get into part 2, they had a shaman that was in the movie. They actually blessed bless the people and stuff like that to try to keep it from that. But yeah, it's like, and it kind of just started right off because this movie came out literally like, when it came out in theaters at the same exact time, the one main star of this, which was the sisters, Dominic Dunn, the actresses, her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend strangled her to death.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And it's even now, I mean, this is what, almost 40 years later now, and we're still even talking about that because I was talking to you. There's,
Yeah.
Netflix has the new Menendez show, and they talk about with Dominic Dunn's father in that, and he's sitting in the one scene, he's sitting down, and this one guy who was working there was telling how much he felt sorry about his daughter passing away, and his condolences, and how much he loved her and loved her in Poltergeist. And I mean, obviously in a character, which is probably a real thing, but the father said, I've never even watched the movie because I can't force myself to watch this movie because obviously it's the last thing that she did before she passed away. So it's just like it's just crazy with that kind of stuff. Like you said, with Heather O'Rourke, Heather O'Rourke passing away. There are a couple of other actors who have passed away kind of weirdly and stuff like that. There's another actor, I can't remember who it is, but another actor that was in the franchise that got murdered as well too. So yeah, it's people go, and there's always this and that. But I mean, people say cursed films, and is it maybe the skeletons that were real? Or this kind of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just things. I mean, things happen. Especially just weird things. I mean, I know it's kind of seems a little cursy when things start happening so much and so often. But I mean, like I said, you and me are a huge, the Crow movie. Would the Crow be considered cursed? I mean, mean you're making a movie and, you accidentally kill off, the main actor. So I mean, things like this have happened. It's unfortunate that when things like this happen, with it, whether it's, an actor or an actress that's murdered or gets in an accident or drug overdoses or even suicide or anything like that. So I mean, to me, I never really believed in the curse and stuff like that, but there are like weird things, like you said, the blank screen being at 12 is kind of odd, you know what I mean? And I guess like nobody really thought about that, and it's like, and then all of a sudden, like I said, she happened to die at 12, and you're like, okay, maybe there is some weird mojo to this movie.
Yeah, it definitely is like a really like interesting thing when it comes to this, and I always loved the design of this movie. I always thought that because I'm big into like story arcs, all the fangs know that, and we talk about that regularly because that's also an important part of the cinematic fantasy is the story arcs and stuff. And I've always really enjoyed the way this movie puts together because paranormal movies can be very, very tricky with the way that they come across, as well as the way that they're shot and the story that's told, because some of them really have that kind of like slow burn that we've talked about before, where it's like you're building it up and building everything up. But the one thing I like about Poltergeist is it has a really great setup in my eyes for how much they want to give you without completely just throwing it all over the table and be like, oh yeah, crazy possessions. This is the reason why. Ancient Indian burial grounds, missing tombstones, but nothing else. I mean, but everything else remains the same. Like, there's so much stuff that they could put out, but they don't. But they do a good job in giving you something, whether it's a jump or a tweak or some type of, spiritual, situation consistently enough that keeps you like invested in the movie, all the way up until where the main action starts, which of course would be Carol Ann's disappearance and subsequently them bringing in Zelda.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cool thing about this movie too, where it's like that old school mentality. Because you have like these movies now, other than maybe like The Conjuring, because those are based off of like real, Ed and Lorraine, so real people. Most times whenever you see movies that have paranormal researchers, they usually seem really fake. It's like you don't believe that they would be a paranormal researcher. But in this movie, it's like that, even though they kind of are new to the game, especially like the younger guys in it, they still feel like they really are like really investigating this. It's like there truly is. It's not like these the new YouTubers that go out and investigate stuff where it's like they're all kind of skeptic except for like the one maybe to begin with, and then all of a sudden crazy shit happens. You see like apparently the ghost from Ghostbusters decides to come to visit them, which I thought was kind of weird. I was like, wait, is that the Ghostbusters chick?
I love
You know?
that. I love that you brought that up because Poltergeist, for the record, Fangs, for anybody who's learning about this movie for the first time, does precede Ghostbusters, and
Yeah.
the first main spirit of Ghostbusters has always been a very pretty well known and legitimate feature, like visual. It starts off the movie, Get Her, and we talk about things getting recycled. It's well known for anybody who like is a deep diver like myself and Devil are, that like when it comes to Hollywood, fangs that are fans of Chucky and fangs that are fans of the Tales from the Crypt, those are the same eyes in Chucky and the Crypt Keeper. But I always thought that was particularly interesting, and it's funny because I've seen Ghostbusters so many more times than I've seen Poltergeist. And I've seen Poltergeist a lot, which says a lot about the Ghostbusters franchise. But that is always something I found to be particularly funny, where I'm like, wow, you couldn't have found something to change that up? The color, the hair, something?
Yeah.
So I think it's fucking awesome that you brought that up, dude, because I've always just thought that was just like such a hilarious little curiosity tidbit.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing about this movie. Like, I mean, there's so much cool visuals and stuff like that. I mean, Caroline going into the TV, and then at one point there's the portal trying to suck them in, and you have these characters that are basically almost kind of getting sucked in, and you can see them like holding on to like props and stuff they're getting pushed in. You have the scary ass tree that the little boy is scared of, which is like, who at one point during thunderstorms and lightning storms and stuff like that as a kid didn't see a tree that was by their house and saw some crazy shit. But I mean, that obviously they made that tree make it a little bit creepier looking, but still, like, you've always seen that kind of stuff. And then, add into the fact that most people are deadly afraid of clowns, and you have this, the killer clown in the scene, which, a lot of young kids in the 80s had that same clown, and definitely burnt it the next day. And that was the one part of it that I didn't, that was I always thought was kind of funny in this movie, was like, this kid is like, throughout this whole entire movie has this clown, right, and is always kind of like, you know, scared of him all the time, where he's trying to sleep. This is before all the paranormal stuff even happens.
Yeah.
He throws the jacket over the clown. So all the paranormal shit happens, and blah 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 blah, and they're packing up the house before all the weird shit at the very very end of the movie. They're packing up their house because they're like, okay, we're getting the fuck out of this house, so that all this paranormal shit. And you're a kid, okay, yeah, you're a parent, you're gonna have, you're gonna keep some toys out for your kids to play with in your transitioning of going from to another house. Why would you have not packed that clown to begin with? I mean, that's the first thing I would have packed. I'd have been like, yeah, I don't need the scary clown right now with
Right.
all this paranormal shit that's been going around. That's all I need to do. But ultimately, understandably why he didn't, because it made a more fantastical, part of the movie, which, when the clown comes alive and, attacks him and, strangles him. And I mean, that was, I mean, if you liked clowns, you probably didn't like clowns too much, especially at this time. You got this, and then, a couple of years later, you got, Pennywise the clown. I mean, they weren't helping kids get over this clown phobia in the 80s and early 90s.
Not at all, brother. And that's the thing that I always also thought was funny and about the clown thing too, is the fact that they packed it up at all. Is like, wait, you just went through all this traumatic stuff. It starts off with, glasses of milk breaking and the silverware getting bent, all the way into like the really crazy stuff. But then like the fact that this clown that was already terrifying, just like all the points you just said, that they were still willing to just take it at all. It's like, why wouldn't you just pitch it into like the swimming pool, like into the muddy puddle type thing, I always found that to be super duper crazy. It's like, yeah, if you insist on keeping it for whatever reason, exactly, why wouldn't you just pack it away so you're just over and done with it first? But the fact that it's not packed at all, it's just out in plain sight like a person's Cabbage Patch doll or whatever. But still, just the fact that they keep it at all, I think is hilarious. I'm like, man, I would, if not putting it in cement or throwing it off of a cliff or whatever, I would have at least at the bare minimum tied that thing to a heavy rock and just chucked it into that skeleton-infested pool.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about this movie too, with the, obviously the poltergeist and stuff like that, and these, unrested spirits that are angry and stuff like that. Then again, it's like, understandably, they have a reason why. Well, I mean, at least in this one, you kind of figure they have a reason why. And, that basically kind of brings up what would be considered sort of the villain in this movie, which is normally not really your typical villain, but your villain is your corporate, greedy, developer that decided to build this cheap condos, houses in what used to be a cemetery, but they didn't take the bodies out. They just basically removed the gravestones, which was funny because the main guy who plays the main developer guy is our Clue from Return of the Living Dead.
Yes. Which I've always found that to be just absolutely like hysterical. I'm just like, wait, hold on a second. Really? You went from that character to this sleaze? Like, come on, man. You want to talk about typecast, but it's just that's one of the things I actually really like about this movie as well. And part of that story arc character is like, because that's an awesome villain. And I'm sure there's plenty of fangs out there that are they're more into, their monsters, or they're into their slashers, or they're into their serial killers, or stuff like that. There's so much I love about like how a real life common person can be a villain. And that's the thing I love about this movie is how, look, you moved the tombstones over there, but you left all the graves intact and built a house on top of it, and then didn't say anything to anybody. You think that just having their tombstones over there for people to remember their loved ones would be good enough. No, you have a family walking on people's graves all day, every day, for the rest of their eternity. It's like, of course they're pissed off. Like, why wouldn't they be? I'd be mad about that. My ass is trying to sleep, and you're walking on my coffin. I'm gonna be pissed as hell at you.
Yeah, I mean that was probably that, and is probably one of the main things I kind of didn't quite understand nearly too in this movie as well. I guess they kind of further along explain it in the second movie, but you have this house. Obviously, like I said, she goes into the pool, and all of a sudden, the grave and the gravestones and the skeletons are coming out. And obviously, you find out that the house was built on the graveyard, and the grave, there's still caskets and the bodies are still there. But then again, I don't understand how there's only those graves and those things there. It would be throughout the whole entire neighborhood. Yeah. So you would think the whole entire neighborhood would have ghosts and poltergeists, and or at least even if they don't have poltergeists or whatever, they would at least have like dead bodies in their backyard when they decided to dig. But it's only this one house, so that was a very small cemetery. But I mean, like I said, eventually in the second one they kind of go a little bit into it more, where you find out like who was buried in their house. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's just, to me, like overall, it was like, wait, that doesn't make no sense. How is it only this house is the only house that's haunted? Should be haunted. The whole neighborhood should be haunted.
No, absolutely, for sure. And that was the way, that I always kind of casually assumed it was in the ballpark of that, was that this was something in the lines of like, a private cemetery where a house could take over this. Like, actual cemeteries have like, you can buy a plot for only a specific amount of tombstones for like your family and stuff like that. So I always did, yeah, kind of assume it was something like in the same ballpark when it came to that, was, you know, that kind of independent thing, which they you know, do explain more in as we get into the second movie, which we're about to get into, you know, right about now. But the one thing before we get into that I also just love is certain things that are done for particular reasons, but you can't help but laugh about at the same time. And that's things like the hotel TV.
Yeah. Yeah. So I said, yeah, it's one of those ones. It's like, okay, yeah, again, but then again, you know, it kind of explains that maybe, you know, it's not just the house that's haunted. You know, it's Carol Ann and stuff like that, which makes sense because, like, you know, they do mention it, you know, later on in the second one and the third one, why Carol Ann was such a large conduit for it, being the fact that she was born in the house, and people go, well. A lot of people were like, no, she was literally born in the house, like not born at the hospital. She was actually born in the house. So that life coming from the beginning of life mixed in with the underneath the dead, it just that radiates so much of that like energy or soul or whatever you want to call it. That's why they're so attached to Caroline or Carol Ann as much, because, you know, she's kind of that you know, that life force that they found, the first thing they found in that house, where it was like, you know, newborn baby's life force is so strong versus, you know, versus anybody else. But yeah, I always thought that was kind of funny though too, to begin with. They were like, really, like this, you know, it's like they get into the hotel, the first thing they do is just take the TV out. Well, like, yeah, we're just gonna shove this TV out here just in case, because it's like, you know, I don't plan on watching any TV again. But yeah, so it's like, are you gonna live by a house next to a tree now too, or
Yeah.
like other little stuff that you want to do? But yeah, you know, segues into the second Poltergeist, which I thought was, I mean, obviously the first Poltergeist is the best of all the Poltergeists. You know what I mean? And the second one continued on. I liked it, you know, the story. I mean, obviously they had to sort of write out Dominic Dunn's character, because obviously, like I said, with her passing and stuff like that, they didn't, you know, I think in this movie she was off in college or something like that, to the extent, so they kind of just wrote her off a little bit. But I like the fact that you know, that the guy who directed this movie, which is Brian Gibson, is the guy who actually directed Styx's Roboto, which I thought was cool.
No, absolutely, for sure. I think that's like super duper cool. And I love when you find out about like people who get into like, you know, that are either into films but then also do these other like side projects, or just kind of, you know, want to do other things. Like, it's one thing for like directing different things, but you can even take a guy like Alex Winter from, like, you know, Bill and Ted and the Lost Boys, who then started directing music videos for bands like Extreme, which I always just thought was like, you know, pretty cool when it came to that. But this was also another, like, you know, crazy, you know, movie as well, also with, you know, secondary like sadness when it came to that, because, you know, you had you know, you had Julian, who was, you know, sick while filming, and that was a crazy situation, you know, as they were dealing with their stomach cancer and stuff like that. But I always did, but I did think they did well, like you said, when it came to this movie, with the way they took the story, because it's hard enough to do any kind of like movie, you know, sequels, and avoiding, like, you know, as that old saying goes, you know, the sophomore slump when it comes to it. So when you've got like this movie where, you know, they've got a new house, you know, but they just can't get away from, you know, the paranormal activity and the demons that they're following. But again, that's also what gets explained by the fact that Carol Ann is the conduit for everything.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. And like, you know, and like I said, you know, 80s was all about marketing.
Yeah.
And like you said, with those one-liners and stuff like that, the big one for the first Poltergeist was "They're here," and then obviously you got to have one for the sequel. So all of a sudden, Carol Ann starts getting some stuff. She goes, "They're back," which I always thought was kind of funny. It was like, yeah, yeah, got to sell those T-shirts, So you got to make sure she says something that's writable.
Yeah. No, absolutely, for sure. And it's the way it's an important part when it comes to like movies and stuff like that. I mean, we have one too. So, it's the way that like, a lot of that stuff, works out and stuff like that. But, again, when it gets into like this movie and stuff, is where you start getting like, Kane, as they're referred to, starts like, the craziness and the assaults and the stuff that, starts really getting everything revved up with more of the violence and the craziness, like, the toy phone attacking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, when in this one, explains, you have this old guy, which I love. I love the whole Kane character in this movie.
Yeah.
Such a creepy, like, kind of Mormon kind of priest. You find out that he was this kind of almost like a what's a Jones Massacre kind of type like priest, like Jim Jones kind of character. And, you know what I mean? And
Kool-Aid devil
it's
drinking Kool-Aid.
drinking the Kool-Aid, always drinking the Kool-Aid. But yeah, that's kind of what this is. You find out that this guy was a cult leader,
Yeah.
and he kind of promised these people, this alternative universe if they sacrificed themselves and killed themselves, and they did, and then they're dead. And that's where you find out that the house that they were in the first one, buried even below the grave, so underneath the graveyard of the graveyard was where his congregational is there and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I liked his character. He's very, very, I'm gonna talk very southerner and kind of get you in there and get you into the thing. And he's just I loved his character. He's really creepy, man. He was just a creepy old man that you were like, like, if any time there was a picture for Stranger Danger in the 80s, that should have been that dude's face, because he was the epitome of like how creepy he was. And not saying him in real life, it's just like
Yeah.
the character wise in that movie. It was just so crazy. Yeah, with him going through the telephone and him just like constantly coming after her, and this like whole new thing. Like I said, they go into this house, which is her mother's house, and you find she passes away, and you kind of, before she passed away, you found out that that they have like a little bit of this extra they can they're kind of mediums in their family, which is another reason why Carol Ann is so strong with that, because it's a family thing where it's all them, they're all kind of connected to to the spiritual world.
No, for sure. And it's crazy too, because it's like so like mole people-esque, like, this being like underground like thing where, you try to have like that like southern drawl, that a little bit of like charm to you, but it's so serial killery. Like you hear about things like, John Wayne Gacy and stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, he's a pillar of the community, but on his own time. And then there's like so much similarities I find with like that Kane character, where he's like, he tries to have a certain amount of like southern charm to him, but then again, his creep factor, his stranger danger meter is just so off the charts that it's like, it's so hard to like not just look at him sideways. And I love the character, just like you said, it's awesome, but it's so hard to like not just look at him and just be like, dude, you just need to leave, and and again, and just like in the first Poltergeist movie, you've got the beast attacking, at the same time as this is, going on. You've got the Freelings. They're trying to get away, and then they have to figure. But then they also get to the the understanding where they actually have to confront the beast in order to get things to stop, and that's where the basically the secondary title of the movie comes from, which is The Other Side.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about it too. You want to talk about this movie, and people talk about the curse and all that stuff that we talked about already. But yeah, you would think that okay, we used real skeletons in the first movie. Some bad shit happened in the first movie. Okay, maybe it might be a curse, it might not be a curse. Hey, let's just use real skeletons again in the second movie. it's like
Serious.
really, like, man, like I said, to the point where I guess people realize that this time, and like I said, the guy who plays the Indian shaman character in this movie is a real life shaman, and
Yeah.
actually, a lot of the actors wanted him to bless the sets because they honestly like were thinking, okay, maybe this this curse thing might be true, and then lo and behold, like I said, they're gonna use real skeletons again, which maybe you shouldn't use real skeletons. Go. I mean, come on, man. The prop ones can't be that much more. I mean, like you said, you would think that real skeletons would cost more than prop skeletons, which makes no sense. Especially maybe at the time of the '80s, that's how it was. Nowadays, it's cheaper for you to go to Spencer's or to like a Spirit Halloween or something like that and buy a fake skeleton than it is to probably go out and buy a real skeleton. Because I mean, you look at like real skeleton bones in like conventions, you're paying a couple $100s for like a femur.
Right. Exactly. Really, that's the way it's going to be. And it gets to that final like showdown where they return to the original house, because that's where they have to like go down like into this tomb in order to like face the beast. You gotta defeat the monster. And it has this interesting dynamic of potential sacrifice, almost like the close loss of Carol Ann, but they were still able to keep her on the right side, and not lose her to the other side.
Yeah. It's kind of cool, like the whole like going on to both sides, and she was kind of like this beacon that could go on both sides of like realms and stuff like that and help ghosts or help spirits, help these people to cross over and kind of stuff like that. So I always thought that was kind of like a cool little extra little side thing that she could do, what I mean, in a sense, like where she can just kind of be herself again. And then like I said, I mean, I love the fact that this in it, I'm saying mother again. You have the return of Zelda in this movie, which I thought was really, really cool. And then like if the boy in the brother in the first movie wasn't traumatized enough by trees and by a clown that's trying to strangle him, he's growing up, he's getting a little bit older, and he gets the braces, and he gets attacked by braces that basically wrap around his body and like wrap around him, and he's kind of just stuck in this like metal weird thing in the bathroom. And it's like, man, I feel bad for this kid. I mean, that's probably even though he's maybe is a reason why he's not in the third movie. They were like, you know what, we feel bad for beating the shit out of this little boy all the time and making bad things happen to this character. Yeah, we're gonna not mention him in this one just because we don't want to. We feel bad for this boy.
For sure. And when it comes to them finally getting freed from the beast, getting out of the other side and everything, and that all basically stems from the killing of Cain. The spearing of the Amish priesty guy.
Yeah,
And
yeah. It was pretty cool. And
oh, go ahead, brother.
yeah. It's such a crazy. Yeah, no, yeah. It's just a crazy, just a crazy ending. And then, like I said, then obviously, you get the third movie that comes out, and obviously the actor who played Kane, like we said, was dying of stomach cancer, so they had to replace him, which is like kind of weird. I mean, I understand why, because his character is such a dominant character in the third movie as well, where like yeah, you would think you would just write him off for a little bit, but yeah, and it's so crazy because as much as as much as the actor that played him in the third one was cool, I liked him. He just didn't have that kind of crazy or it factor like the original guy had. He just had that kind of like that like childhood like uh, aspect to him, but then again, like I said, so creepy and stuff like that. Which, like I said, in the third one, he definitely is creepy in this movie, and like I said, he's definitely fun. He's a fun, character in this one, but not nearly as creepy as the original Kane.
Yeah.
But understandably, like I said, obviously when an actor passes away, in that character, you got to keep it. You got to get somebody else. And I thought did a
Yeah.
pretty good, for him. I thought the guy that got was enough that I remember years going like, really, they had another guy. Like for a minute, I thought he was the same dude. He just kind of looked a little differently. Then finding out it was a different actor and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah, like I said, a lot of the third one is obviously the downfall sort of the series. You know what I mean? It's definitely not nearly as good. I mean, I like the fact that they took away the mother that Craig and the mom and the dad didn't want to go. They didn't want to come back again, so they just kind of made it where it's the her mom's sister and her husband, which to me I always love because it's one, you get the father figure is Tom Skerritt. Who doesn't love freaking Tom Skerritt? And then the aunt figure is the chick that I love, the actress from RoboCop.
Right. For sure.
So it's like,
And one of the other things, though, real quick, before we get solidly into the breakdown of 3, is I got to take us back just a moment to the end of 2, because I can't help but again get a little chuckle out of the fact that they found another way to end the movie with some comedy, with them deciding to give the car to Zelda and her mate because they liked it, but then realized that they had no ride home. So
yeah,
they're chasing the car down, almost like a comedic running version of like the way the old like Hulk TV shows used to be. But I love the fact that they tweaked a little bit of comedy into that one, But
yeah, I mean that's yeah, like I said, and the thing with this one, obviously, like I said, we talked about it earlier in the first one. This movie was the movie that ultimately, shortly after it was finished, Heather O'Rourke did pass away, and a lot of it people like didn't realize that, like, yeah, I guess like she was medicated. They thought that she had Crohn's disease and they gave her medications for something else. And hence the reason why in this movie, a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, they just thought maybe she just got a little bit chunkier or something like that. But her cheeks throughout the movie are super, super, very, very punchy and, kind of squirrely and stuff like that. And I guess, like, at the time when she was making it, I heard that, that she was really, really animate about, like, really hated it because it made her look a certain way. She got kind of, self-conscious about like how she's gonna look and stuff. Like obviously, you're a 12-year-old, almost, 11-year-old, 13-year-old girl, so obviously you're gonna start looking, you want to think about how you portray yourself or how you look on these films and stuff like that. Like I said, it's ultimately like it's such a sad thing that happened because, like I said, she was. I mean, you got to realize, and this, if she died in the making of this movie, or when this movie was ending, she was like 6 or 7, when she did the original first Poltergeist, and how an amazing of an actress she was. Like she was a better actor than most of those adults that were in that movie. You know what I mean? Just the way that she was, the way she just played off of them, the way she got smart and kind of like, did those little shrugs and little like kind of stuff like that. She was just it's like, it's one of those ones that like, I would have loved to, like when they say with child actors and stuff like that, it's kind of one of those ones where which you have been a child actor that, ultimately, had bad things happen to them or something like that, as far as like not, the childhood actors that, ended up having committed suicide or going to drugs or because they don't get as much work, or would you have been one of those child actors that progressively gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and would have became a huge star? But yeah, like I said, we'll never know. But the one thing that we do know is that her name in Poltergeist 3 is said 122 times. It gets to the point where, like, Jesus Christ, we know her name is Carol Ann. Shut the fuck up.
Dude, it's like Michael in Lost Boys, bro.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah,
holy.
it's definitely not a drinking game. Do not drink anytime someone says Carol Ann
No,
in the third movie because you will be dead.
like crazy dead. Like, it's insane with that. But yeah, I mean the third movie's fun. It's the downplay of the franchise, but it's based, around Carol Ann, living with her aunt and uncle to attend this gifted school. That's, basically the gist and the premise of the movie and stuff like that. And, overall it's cool, but yeah, not, again, Nathan plays the returning Kane character, again, to be like the main protagonist and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's just kind of an interesting like design on the movie. It comes across more almost for me as that still kind of like cat and mouse type game, where it's it's Kane chasing Carol Ann.
Yeah, yeah. The crazy thing about this whole entire movie, which is such a crazy concept, and I don't 100% know whether or not this is even actually a thing right now, but you would think that it would be, is that this movie is basically like, even in the beginning, it's in a skyscraper. Because obviously in the beginning of the movie, she sees the guy washing the windows and at one time turns into Kane for a second. And that's how, you get this little kind of like scariness and stuff like that. But the crazy thing about this, okay, you're in this skyscraper building that not only has apartments that people live in, it's got a pool that people live into, it's got jobs and businesses that these people who live in the apartments work at. It's got a supermarket and all this other crazy stuff. It's basically a one-shot town
Yes.
inside this one skyscraper building. And I'm like, that is the craziest thing ever. Like, I mean, like I said, I don't know whether or not like some major cities have a building that's like that, but I'm like, that'd be the craziest thing ever. Like, literally, like, you live, you work, you exercise, you shop. I mean, like I said, not even a grocery store. They had like malls and there's
Yeah.
like shopping malls, clothes. So everything you need to do in your entire life is literally in this one building. And I'm like, that's the craziest thing ever. It's like, I couldn't imagine where it's like, like, hey, okay, I need to go grocery shopping. You just ding, go down an elevator and go grocery shop and come back up. I'm like, like I said, I mean, I don't know whether or not this is a thing, but if not, this needs to be a thing because that's the coolest thing about this whole entire movie is it's like this concept of this building is like the most insane part of this. I mean, the security in this building is horrible because the girl's able to just do whatever she wants to just because she's got daddy's keys.
Yep.
But that's another story.
Yeah. No, for sure. And ultimately, when we get, towards the end, and again, we're dealing with the other side, and we actually lose the first real constant, speaking in terms of the character, we lose our first real constant character in three movies, when, Zelda's character Tangina is killed by Kane.
Yeah, yeah, she's kind of sucked into like sort of reminds me of the bad guy from Who Framed Roger Rabbit when he got turned into and sucked to it's kind of just, it was like nothing left of her body. It was just like a shell of her former self.
Right. It's funny. It almost reminded me a little bit of that scene from with Deadpool and Wolverine when, like, the Professor Xena character, like, yanks the skin, like, right off of
Yeah.
Johnny.
Spoiler alert.
You guys, we play no favorites, Fangs. Nothing personal, but you had enough time. So, and by the time this episode airs, then Devil and I really don't want to hear it. So,
Yeah.
but
If you haven't seen that movie by now, by the time this airs, that's on you. That's what I always say. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's the funniest thing ever. I mean, I always joke around people like that, and that's how I always made a joke about, like, people going to the movies and seeing, like, Titanic, where, like, some guy went, "Hey, the ship sinks," and people are like, "Spoiler alert!" I'm like, well, if you didn't know that the ship sank to begin with, you're an idiot, because Titanic is a real thing and it's real history. So it's like, yeah, if by the time this comes out, if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine, sorry, we know more than what your Facebook is gonna spoil it for you.
yeah. And ultimately, when we get to the end of this movie, like, it's basically, Tangina's character is still kind of the hero, as she's still got this power about her in death. Her necklace comes into play as, like, kind of a guiding light, kind of protection symbol for the parents. And it's almost like a very interesting negotiation of, Tangina convincing, Kane to just kind of go with her, and just kind of go into the light, go into heaven, go into the other side, kind of however you want to look at it, where even the end of the movie it feels a little anticlimactic because it almost seemed a little too easy.
Yeah. I mean, like, to me, I mean, ultimately, like I said, as far as this movie, the cool things that I thought about this movie that I thought was pretty neat was, like I said, the hotel. I love the fact that the mirrors that were used, and you kept seeing Kane opening up door and then opening up another door, opening up another door, and you kept seeing him. So I love that whole play, be in these mirrors and kind of, like, play around and mess around with the people. But I also like the fact that, when in this one, like I said, in the other ones, every time they kept going in to the other side, they come out, they were kind of goopy or kind of slimy, sort of like, like you said, like your Ghostbusters, your slime. But I like this one because they came back and they were icicles. It was frozen. I mean, this one was more of like, kind of hell freezing over, sort of, like, kind of cool kind of aspect of it. Yeah. But I mean, like I said, I mean, I thought the scene, where she's looking in the mirror and she kind of is old and she's going after, kind of, I love that stuff. But the walking around the garage and all of a sudden falling in a puddle, it was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But
Yeah.
like, I'm inside this puddle.
That's just their Oscar. Just like, so dramatic. I do, and the thing that's also kind of interesting about the end of this movie is we don't get that comedy aspect that we got at the end of the first two movies. But, you and I talk regularly about sequels. Would we want a sequel? This movie kind of hints to the potential of there actually being a fourth Poltergeist movie, because with Kane's laughter and just kind of the idea that he might not be gone, does, at least at the time, did set up for a potential fourth movie. Whether that movie would have seen the light is kind of up for debate, because this movie only did so well, and even that's kind of putting it a little bit nicely. But this movie still wasn't without its charm. But then, of course, with the real life passing of Heather O'Rourke, I can imagine that any and all plans to continue it all were probably just instantly scrapped.
Yeah. Once you pretty much lose, like, your the main the main person in this movie. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could have. I mean, if you wrote something, you probably could have put in another another actress into that role. Maybe as like especially with her, you could have made it where it's years later and she's older and stuff like that, and maybe that's why she is. But I think just like I said, out of respect for Heather, and I think this is the fact that how like the series was kind of declining and declining a little bit. I think it was just best for them. I mean, I know they did come out with that Poltergeist Legacies for a little bit. That was a short-lived TV series that lasted whatsoever, which was really bad. And obviously, you have the remake that came out a few years ago, which was horrible. I wish they would. That's one of those remakes that I kind of wish that they didn't remake. I mean, I like the updated like poorness of it, but yeah, I mean it's not
Yeah.
going to be the same. Like I said, I mean not even saying that you can't get another. I mean it's just like I said, it's one of those ones that like Heather O'Rourke was just one of those like rare diamond that you're only going to get once in a generation. I think she would have been like a Shirley Temple or
Yeah.
one of the like even like a Drew Barrymore or something like that from that the late 70s early 80s. I think she would have been someone like that where she would have been I think she would have been a huge movie star just because of how well and how professional she was from people who worked with her and just how she just seemed to act in these movies.
Yeah, man, I agree 100%. I would have loved to have seen, Heather outside with a continued career, whether she decided to stay as a scream queen or move into other like potential roles, drama, comedy, whatever her career would have taken her. I thought that would have been really cool to see. That unfortunately we didn't get to. We kind of got robbed of that. Yeah, when it came to the remake, I didn't hate it. I really didn't. I didn't hate it, but I didn't need it either. It was kind of one of those things where I went to go see it. We went and saw it. It's like I kind of feel like I have to, but I also felt that same way about the remake of Blair Witch. I was like, I mean, I kind of feel like I have to, but it just kind of is what it is. But they tried, and I thought it was all right. So when we look back at the franchise as a whole, my friend Monfrere, how do you rate this as an overall franchise? We usually pit a movie versus a movie, but we're doing a franchise versus a franchise. How do you look at the Poltergeist franchise when it comes to the obituaries, my friend?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, obviously the first one is the highlight, is the creme de creme as far as the Poltergeist series. I mean, to me, I don't think that even as bad as some of the things that happened in the second one, and a lot of people like completely shit on the third one. I still think the third one had its moments. I still
Yeah.
liked it. It's still a watchable movie now. I watched it again recently when we were doing this, and it still has its moments. Yes. Is it the weakest of the series? Yes. I mean, but if you compare it to other series of where you have trilogies, is it as bad as some other ones that could be where it's definitely not nearly as bad as like it could have been, and definitely like I said, it's definitely in that ballpark where it's definitely not the greatest of the three movies, and to me it doesn't. I feel that the greatness of the first one is going to be up there as far as the score wise. I mean, the first Poltergeist is just been etched in pop culture and stuff like that forever. I mean, we were friends with Wednesday 13, and he references a lot of Poltergeist and stuff like that. It's just a movie that I grew up with. It's just an awesome like horror movie, but to like an extent where it's not. It's a horror movie that's kind of made for everybody.
Mhm.
Adults can see it. Teenagers can see it. Some little, depending. I mean, in the 80s we watched it as kids, but I mean, some kids can still watch it where it's not bloody and graphic and people aren't getting killed, and it's not nearly as bad. It's more of like kind of like jump scares, kind of like get you kind of psychological horror kind of to that part. Where like, yeah, the second one, like I said, the second one is still a fun movie to watch. I still like the second one. Like I said, Kane's character and that actor was so freaking creepy. It's beyond creepiness. And like I said, the third one, like I said, yeah, it's definitely the sour of the trilogy, but it's not to the point where I don't think that if you're going to give good grades to the second one and okay grade for the third one, the second one, the first one's going to be majorly good. I don't think the third one's going to drag it down where it's going to put the series as a whole in a bad spot. So for me, I think overall, I'd have to give Poltergeist as a trilogy a 7.0 because, like I said, that first one is so good, and the second one and the third one kind of drag down the score a little bit. If I was gonna do Poltergeist as itself, I'd probably give Poltergeist like an 8 or an 8.5 as far as how much I love that movie and just how much of a good movie it was. And like I said, those 2 and 3 are bad, but not bad enough to keep that to downgrade the franchise itself to anything lower than a 7.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, brother. Devil, I think that's great. I'm super down for that. I think 7 is the way to go. I'm definitely with you. And 100%, if we're doing Poltergeist, it's an 8, 8.5, no questions asked, 100%. You lose a little bit on the second one, you lose a little bit more on the third, but it's definitely not a plummet. It takes enough off of the franchise as a whole if we're being, completely objective in our grading systems and we're being honest with our thoughts and stuff. It is the fact that, it is a decline when it comes to the movies from 1 to 2 to 3. But again, it's definitely not a bad franchise. They do pretty well when it comes to, because when you continue on a franchise, especially with reoccurring characters, it is really easy to have plot holes, to forget things, to have continuity errors. And honestly, I thought overall they actually did a pretty good job remembering things, researching previous movies, and doing their best not to have, like, mistakes when it came to that kind of a thing. So I'm with you, man. I think 7.0 is good, man. I'm definitely with you on that one for sure. So that's how we're going to give that one. We are going to give the Poltergeist franchise a 7.0. And now we're going to jump into its counterpart, which is very similar in the veins of demons and spirits and ghosts, but is a completely different designed franchise based on how you conjure up said spirits. And that is us tackling the Witchboard franchise. An absolute favorite franchise of mine. I think anybody who knows this particular vampire knows how much he loves the Witchboard series. And, not for the sake of, like, getting up on my soapbox and trying to name drop or anything, but, the late, great Tawny Katane from Witchboard was also a personal friend of mine. And, Devil, I know that you had the opportunity to speak with her as well. And she was always just a wonderful human who, like Heather O'Rourke, we didn't lose super quickly like Heather, but still lost her, unfortunately, much earlier than we should have. So, it's unfortunate that we don't have, Tawny with us anymore to have her on the show to talk about, what was going on with Witchboard. But overall, it's a very, very cool movie. It came out in 1986, and the thing that I love about the movie is while The Exorcist was probably the first movie to really kind of use a Ouija board, Witchboard, talking board, spirit board in a way that causes a demonic reaction. Witchboard is literally the first movie that dedicates the entire premise of the movie to a Ouija board and to a Witchboard, and also educating you on the rules, of which there are rules when it comes to using a Witchboard. And I just really, really like it. It's based around this couple and, and their friends. It starts off at a house party where you've got, like, Tawny's boyfriend and her kind of, like, friend, quote unquote, from her, like, class. And they're having, like, a house party, and he kind of brings up the idea of using, like, using this Witchboard that he's a big fan of, and, like, trying to educate everybody on, like, you have to use it where it's touching skin. You don't use it by itself. You always got to make sure to say thank you, and you always say goodbye, and you always have to be respectful, while also understanding that you might not always be talking to the person you think you are.
Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing about, like, when I think about this movie, it's like, you got a bunch of people that are all like, they're probably all in their like mid to late 20s and stuff like that in this movie. They're like hanging out, they're partying, they're having a good time. They're hooping, and they're like, yeah, let's play some games. Yeah, man, we want to play some games. I feel like the only person in the world that I know that would probably like, hey, let's go do a Ouija board. It's probably you. Like, who in the world just all of a sudden just comes out and goes, yeah, let's play a board game. Yeah, okay, I got Monopoly, I got chess. Nah, anybody got anything cooler than that? Yeah, let's bring out the Witchboard. Let's bring out the Ouija. And it's like, well, I don't know what parties you've been to. I mean, maybe those might have been those secret P Diddy parties, maybe or something like that. Who knows? But yeah. Anyway, I've been to some crazy parties, Ben, and I don't think I've ever had a party where anybody's ever broke out a Ouija board. I've played with Ouija boards, and I've had friends of mine that we have Ouija boards, but it was never at a party situation where it was like a bunch of drunk idiots. Like, I mean, I've played a lot of drunk games. I've played Dungeons and Dragons drunk and chess and everything else in the world you can think of, strip poker and everything else, but I've never played drunk Witchboard.
like the fact that this dude just has the Ouija board, like just on call, like it's just it's right there for whenever he wants to have it available. So there is a certain amount of just like, what the fuck, how, why, for real about this movie that is very campy. But getting back on point, the movie as a whole, I think it's a cool concept.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, the cool thing about this movie, it's just a cool premise. It's that, like, you got to learn the rules of the Witchboard, and the main thing is don't use it alone. And unfortunately, Tawny's character in this movie doesn't heed that warning and plays with the Witchboard alone. And like you said, I mean, unfortunately, like I said, a couple years ago we did lose Tawny, because it would have been even though both of us have respectfully had interviews with her, it would have been nice to have brought her on for this adventure of us doing Vampireanddevil and talking about Witchboard, because she would have absolutely loved it. The times that we talked about Witchboard, it was a movie that she was super fond of. She's a movie that she still watches. She's like, she considers it, which rightfully so, like me or you, it's a staple in Halloween.
Yeah.
It's a October movie you need to watch. And that was the cool thing about her, talking to her and stuff like that, where, she, this movie is fun. It's campy. She looks amazing in this movie, and she shows some skin in this movie.
Yep.
But she still loves it, you know what I mean, and still is completely down with with talking about Witchboard. So yeah, it's just it's a sad thing to think about when you think about the overall, like, how cool things would have been, if she was still with us and we'd be able to talk to her about this movie. But anyway, getting back into the movie, Tanya doesn't, her character does not learn her lesson, and uses the Ouija alone. And so like he said, sometimes you think you're talking to somebody good, and sometimes you think you're not. Who knows? The one thing that main Ouija guy says in this movie is that the spirit's liars. They're a bunch of liars. So you never know. You never can trust who's on that other side of the board.
No, 100% for sure. And that's the thing, because you've got her boyfriend Jim, and you've got Brandon, the school friend with the Ouija board. And the thing is like, as you see, Linda falling under progressive entrapment, is when Jim starts getting concerned about just the way that she's reacting. She's swearing more. She just seems testy, and jumpy, and he starts actually, for lack of a better term, forming this little bond with Brandon, not so much as friends, but just like, look, bro, you know about this stuff, and I need your help, and I don't know what to do, And that's also where you start learning about the Malvador character, who basically is the demon. He's the villain of this movie. He's the possessed, murderer in the board. And, Brandon's like, well, I want to introduce you to Zarabeth, who's this very kooky, like 70s, like pot smoking medium kind of character. She's so bizarre. And, and tries to get like educated from her. And she's just kind of like, I almost feel like the thing is, and I can't help but like laugh about this a little bit, is I almost kind of want to refer to as Zarabeth as Witchboard's Kathleen Wilhoit, because similar to to Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Keith Coogan, because she just has that so like dishes are done, man, attitude about the way that she behaves and stuff like that. But anyway, they try to bring in Zarabeth to try to shed some light on the demonic aspects of this, and then they think that they're done talking to her for the day, and then she goes home and she ends up getting thrown out the window by Mount Vador and impaled on like a fountain or like fence post kind of thing. And then Jim and Brandon are finding out about that, and they're trying to learn about things as they continue to realize that, okay, it is the board, because Linda's refusing to stop playing this, and Malvador has started to infiltrate her subconscious and taking over, her body. And, they're trying to get a different board in order to talk to, the spirit inside the board that Brandon was friends with, to try to learn about this. And Mount Vador gets, gets involved, ultimately, shows, Brandon how sharp an axe can be. And that's what leads Jim to needing to get back to Linda to hopefully put a stop in this. And the biggest way to stop it is finding a way to destroy a Ouija board, which is not an easy task.
Yeah. That's just cool. I love how you brought her characters. That is the best character in this movie. That's like the best way to explain, especially with us doing, this Witchboard versus Poltergeist, is basically it's Zelda meets Madonna. Yeah. That was basically how it was. She's just this kooky, over the top, like 80s trope. I mean, she's exactly what the 80s was about, like just with her hair and the makeup and the outfit and stuff like that. Then you have this extra part of with her being, this medium and stuff like that, and just like her little that's just a joke that we say, that's just a medium joke or a spirit person's joke. She's like, she kept making all these like quirky jokes, and that's the one thing about it, like, yeah, that's the one thing, that one thing you knew it was coming, was gonna die, but you kind of wish she would have been in the movie a little bit longer, just because she was a fun character. But yeah, I mean, she definitely was fun. Yeah, like I said, yeah, I mean, the whole this whole movie, like I said, with the friend being killed in the beginning of the movie, and stuff like that. It's like, it's definitely this movie is definitely opposite Poltergeist, where they're not afraid of killing characters and killing characters quick in this movie.
No, absolutely. And while it seems to the Fangs that, we kind of are powering through this movie as opposed to like Poltergeist, the thing about Witchboard, in reality, it's much more a traditional, straightforward story arc to that. There were so many nuances and little intricacies of Poltergeist that we have to talk about, that builds up to things, the little things, the milk glass breaking, the spoons, being thrown around the room, Mom being thrown into the mud puddle pool and the skeletons coming out. So many little nuances to discuss. Witchboard's a completely different style of movie. It's a very straightforward arc when it comes to that. Curious girl is introduced to Ouija board, doesn't listen to the rules, gets possessed, confuses friends try to intervene, friends are getting picked off one by one, ultimate showdown of boyfriend trying to get girlfriend back. That's kind of the overall basic arc of this. And that's really kind of the way that it goes. But it's really, I personally think it's very well acted. I like the design of it. I think it's got a real solid watchability. I've seen it thousands of times. I'll see it thousands of more. Not only for, like I've stated, personal reasons, but I also legitimately enjoy the movie. It's fun for me. I like it quite a bit. And it's cool. And then ultimately, while I do think the way that they get Linda's character back is slightly anticlimactic by, shooting the board with a gun, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like other movies we've talked about where even in comedy aspects, they talk about, oh man, what a weak ending. No big dramatic scene. It did feel a little bit shit when it came to that. But I loved the kind of battle fight scene at the end where Malvador's character is inside of Tawny and she's trying to murder Jim, talking the way she's talking. She's got this sort of, not like rock as in rock and roll, but this just kind of like rock style-y, gothic kind of dress and way that she's presenting herself. But then, ultimately they find that, putting a bullet through this thing is what ultimately ends up freeing Linda up from Malvador's, trance, possession, so on.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point when you were talking about too, like you were talking about whenever she was, being possessed by this demon, she was doing things that she wouldn't normally do. Like you said, she was swearing and saying stuff and doing stuff that wasn't typical to her character. Says, I have a question for you now. Like you said, we're talking about her, this change of her attitude and her personality and stuff like that in this movie, and you find out that it's because of the demon kind of possessing her and making her do things that she wouldn't normally do, like swearing and stuff like that. In the beginning of this movie, at least for me, it seems from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie that Linda and Tawny's character's hair was lighter, and at the end of towards the end of the movie, it got redder and redder. Is that was in my head, or do you think that or was it really redder, and that maybe that had to do with her character becoming more, more darker and more, fiery?
I think it had a little bit to do with the character becoming more fiery and feisty. I'll be honest. As much as Tawny and I had talked about this movie, we never actually talked about that. So I really can't say honestly if that was maybe a lighting trick, something that they did in particular with the way the movie was shot, or like I said, lighted, or things like that. But it's definitely a real possibility that was planned, because it is something that I had seen, but I never really thought about it quite like that. But there are parts of the movie that really were planned, and things I noticed and that were real. Like when you look at the cherub on the actual Ouija board at the top, as you watch the board at the beginning of the movie, the cherub's got regular angel's wings. And then by the end of the movie, the cherub's wings have turned into like bat wings, like devil, like spiky wings, as the possessions get like that much more. So there definitely are things that they did plan and little nuances that they did put into that movie that I know for a fact were part of the darker side of the movie.
Yeah.
But the hair's a good one. It definitely did have a certain amount of brightness or pop or heat to it as her character became more feisty. But I don't personally know offhand if that was 100% done on purpose. I do think it's very possible that it was, but don't really have a full-on answer for you on that one, though, my friend.
Yeah. Because I mean, like when everybody thinks about, when you think about, Witchboard and you think about Tawny Kitaen, the main thing you think is, the White Snake, video, and you always see her in these things, and she always has really, really fiery red hair. And in the beginning of the movie, it seemed like it was a lot lighter than how her hair normally was, really brighter. And then towards the end of the movie, middle of the movie, the red hair that I always remember her always having kind of stuff. So I was just kind of curious whether or not you kind of noticed it too, or her hair color kind of went with her demeanor as far as her character wise.
Yeah, I definitely something noticed for sure, but not 100% sure personally when it came to whether or not it was planned. But I mean, I've always loved this movie, and I've always thought it was just like super duper cool and a really just kind of unique take on that. And it sets up with that possession idea as well as the board's shot with a bullet hole put through it, and then it's thrown thrown away, and then it just kind of shoots back to you. It's got that very 80s, slight cheese factor, but kind of that very 80s like staple of you think it's over, but it might not be over. And this is, obviously long before we would have known if there was another Witchboard movie greenlit, but just kind of that idea of things that they had also talked about earlier in the movie of ways of ways to destroy a Ouija board, if you can even destroy it at all, which a lot of stuff is spoken about that you really can't, because you can't burn it, you can't do things with it, and it's always going to come back. So I loved the end of the movie where they just did the very 80s stylistically, like, spinning kind of board, like, bam, like right back to the screen before it hits credits.
Yeah, that was always the part that I was always confused with too. It was like, yeah, it's like, how do we get rid of this? Oh, you can't throw it away, and you can't burn it, and you can't do this, but you can shoot it, and it's gonna and you're gonna win. I'm like, wait, so fire burning it doesn't work, but shooting a gun at it, it's gonna work. I was kind of like, yeah. Again, kind of the motif of the movie where you think the spirits are lying. So maybe like I said, they shoot it, it goes away for a little bit, knowing that some other idiot's gonna pick it up and he's gonna come back and go with them instead.
Yeah. So, but it's a cool movie. It's really interesting. It intertwines in a certain way, and it bridges into a cool follow-up movie, a movie that I definitely enjoyed, similar to Poltergeist 2. It is a slight downgrade from the first one, which we'll break down in, but I definitely enjoy it. I've also seen it quite a few times, and that's Witchboard 2. That's got Amy playing the main character in that movie, which I personally just think is a really cool follow-up. When it comes to Witchboard 2, though, I'll tell you, brother, I've always been a fan of this movie. I consider it actually a pretty high regard, personally, when it comes to a quality sequel. It's not going to hold that full candle to Witchboard, just like we discussed with Poltergeist. But I personally thought they did a very good job. I thought the story was unique enough to where it's not that full-on sequel where it's, okay, this is where, Tawny's character went here, or this sort of thing or that. It's a completely separate situation. But anyway, getting into Witchboard 2, it's based around the Amy character, and I think it's really cool. It's just basically about this artistic girl, this artsy girl, getting this apartment of her own from these kind of not shady, but definitely unique landlords, and finds this Witchboard in her closet. But I think Amy does a really good job in the movie as the main character. I really, enjoy it quite a bit. But yeah, man, I just think I think it's a cool movie overall.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, it's it's definitely not gonna be winning any Oscars or any of that kind of stuff, especially versus the first movie. But it was entertaining, it has its moments throughout it. I love the fact that the main actress is, kind of royalty as far as the entertainment business goes, because it's Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees' daughter. And I love the fact that she put in her contract and put her foot down and kept to her foot being down, that she had a no nudity clause. And as much as they were trying to get her to do nudity for this movie, and not saying them, I don't mean as the director, I mean the producers and all the big wigs and stuff like that, because they wanted the international sales of this movie to go big, because the first movie had nudity in it. So like, okay, we can do some. And you gotta as much as I love nudity, and as much as I would probably have loved to seen some nudity scenes with her, I gotta command anybody that if that's the route they want to go, to put your foot down and be like, hey, it's either I don't do this, or you know, you find somebody else. And luckily, like I said, luckily, I think the director kind of pushed it off so much towards the end of the movie that they were basically had almost no choice but to go with it, because if it would have been in the very beginning of them filming it, they probably would have been like, okay, we haven't really filmed anything, we were gonna scrap her out. And they were like, he was probably like, oh yeah, we're getting to her, I'm getting her, and then when it came to it, like, hey, where's the nudity? Like, oh yeah, no nudity.
We weren't allowed, and and you never really know about the conversations that really happen when it comes to like body doubles and stuff like that, because it's very common in cinema to have like a body double when it comes to things. But at the same time, in my opinion, you would still need to get the certain actresses' approval for that, because they're going to be looked at still to a certain degree, where it's like, is this her body? Hey, you did nudity in this. No, actually, I didn't. Are you sure? And all that kind of stuff. Amy Dolan's goes full frontal in Witchboard too, and it's like, no, I didn't at all. And then it sets up for those kind of questions and whatnot. So, and you see it in certain credits too. They'll make sure that things are out there too. It'll be like such and such's body double in this scene. So it's always kind of interesting with that. And then the one thing that always kind of gave me a little chuckle about this movie was kind of that typical antagonist boyfriend thing that I was like, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, did you just need to have another like X versus X situation? Like, did it have to be, this, artsy, accountant girl leaves her police officer boyfriend, gets a place of her own, but then he's lingering around trying to make her see the error of her ways and be like, give me another chance. Like, you don't need this. We were perfect. She's like, clearly we weren't. So that's always something about the movie that I thought was kind of like, really? Why? Like, does that have to be a thing? Because so many people do it, obviously, whether it's, especially in late 80s, early 90s horror / kind of stuff. And so that was always something that was more of just a casual peeve of mine when it came to this movie. It doesn't take away from how much I enjoy the movie. I mean, none of the fangs are going to be able to see it, but all 3 Witchboard large posters are right over my shoulder on my living room wall. And I've always loved the poster of this movie with the hand coming out of the Ouija board and strangling Amy. But anyway, that was something that I always thought was a little bit just redundant in so many movies. And it's like, fuck, another movie that just has to have that involved. Why does that need to be a thing? Why couldn't just the neighbor find her cute and kind of want to be involved? Why couldn't you have gone that route? Again, stuff like that has been used before, but nowhere near to the degree of like the jealous, semi-remorseful like ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, I get that. Maybe, the only thing that I can think of, at least in particularly with this movie, is that maybe that abusive, ex relationship, him trying to squeezle his way back in, kind of sleazy, and in this instance, him being a cop, so that stereotype of most cops being very forceful and very controlling and stuff like that, maybe was used as a catalyst for her wanting to use the Witchboard, as far as like maybe just being lonely, or that kind of stuff. So I mean, I could see it maybe a little bit in this movie, even though they didn't really use it for that caliber for the reasoning. But yeah, it's like, yeah, again, it's like, okay, yeah, you got the asshole ex-boyfriend, you got this new guy that she's kind of interested in. That it's partly like, I think he's related to like the people that own the building or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, again, another triangle that I guess they thought that it worked well in the first movie. Let's just try it again in this movie. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I did like, I did like certain parts of this movie. Like, I'm not nearly as high regarding the second one as you do. I mean, I find it entertaining. I definitely, it's been a while since I've watched it and watched it again, and I could watch it. It was fun.
Yeah.
It definitely, like I said, it's not the greatest sequel, but
Sure.
compared to the world of 80s and early 90s sequels, it's actually way better than a lot. So you got to give it that as far as that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought it was a fun story. A little bit differently from the original one, but still had that kind of similarity to it. You can definitely tell that it was done by the same people and stuff like that. So it had that, even though, like I said, it was two completely opposite stories as far as character wise, and even the board. I mean, like you would think, okay, she found this board in the movie when she first moves in. Okay, maybe we make a connection that this board was the board from the first movie or something like that. But no, you found out that it was left by somebody who used it and stuff like that. So I mean, they probably could have tied it in with the original one, with the first one, but I kind of like that they didn't. I like it that it's a standalone movie, and it's one where, like, not saying that most people do it, but if you were to watch Witchboard 2 and never seen Witchboard 1, you'd still be okay.
For sure. And the one thing I will say, though, that I don't fully hate about the whole ex-boyfriend thing is it does kind of work for the twist slash direction of this movie, because again, while I roll my eyes at just another 80s early 90s style movie that has just a bitter ex trying to get back with the girlfriend, it allowed for the kind of, what would you say, kind of like murder mystery, kind of true crime aspect of this movie that I always thought was kind of cool, where you had David as the spirit in the board that Linda was talking to in the first Witchboard. You've got Susan, who Amy's character is talking to in this movie as like the, spirit that's, in the board. So when you've got Paige, who's the her actual character's name, talking with Susan, like you had said, there is that kind of local, like, neighbor photographer, Russell, who's in some ways related to the tenants. And when things are really getting out of hand, people are dying and vanishing, is when Paige is trying to kind of talk to him about it. And is like, well, I see this lady, Susan, who comes and talks to me. And Russell was kind of like, well, there's a problem with that. I mean, she used to live this lifestyle of like prostitution and whatnot, but she's dead, like dead, and has been dead. And that's one of the things I thought was kind of cool, because with that knowledge, obviously, what's Paige going to do? But as her curiosity fluctuates, she's like, well, I need to find out more information. Well, the library's one thing, but my ex is a cop. He can get real information, and he, and she was, so she started asking him, like, look, I need you to do research on this Susan character for me. Like, I need to know if this is a thing. And, and then, of course, in typical paranormal, activity, once the possibility of the ghost's, cover being blown, for lack of a better term, they start targeting those specific people, like Russell gets into a car accident and things like that.
Yeah. I just thought that was kind of funny though too, because the whole entire time, the cop ex-boyfriend's trying to weasel his way in, and he's like, "Oh, they don't need to get this apartment. You could just stay with me." And all this kind of stuff like that. And she's all rejecting him throughout the whole entire movie. But then as soon as she needs some help, who's the first person she calls? She calls the ex-boyfriend, which is basically just like feeding into like, okay, maybe she's interested in me again. It's like like you always say blame these women in these movies or just in real life. It's like, yeah, you're leading it on. It's like, if you didn't want anything to do with your ex anymore, then just wash them completely clean.
Yeah.
Don't just use them whenever it's convenient for you. So that was always fun. That part of the movie always made me laugh. Was like, oh no, stay away from me. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Blah blah blah. And then 2 seconds later, she's calling him like, "Hey, I need you to like do the search," which is like, even though he's a cop, it's still not 100% legal for a cop to use that, for personal gain, personal references or personal gain or anything like that. So, she is making him do something that he's really not supposed to be doing, but then like, no, I don't want you anymore.
No, for sure. But, and it's one of those devil's advocate kind of things as well, because everything you said is 100% right. But the one thing they don't really clarify, but in my opinion, it's clear-ish, is that the downfall of the relationship, like the breakup of the relationship, seems somewhat recent. It'd be one thing if at one point they clarified that he had just been pestering the shit out of her for 2 years, and then be like, now you need me. So you're telling me there's a chance. There's a little bit more, in my opinion, of that at least casual look to where the relationship was still relatively fresh, which is why they're still talking so much. But it is kind of that same thing where it's like, well, she still needs me. She still needs a man. Come on, I can still be that man. But yeah, so there's definitely a campiness to that. But I mean, it still leads towards like that typical, end of the movie, slight typical, but at the same time, again, it doesn't work that way. Destroying of the Ouija board, when it's like you can't actually destroy one. They covered that. It's almost like Scream. There are rules to surviving a horror movie. And Witchboard, and with Witch Ouija spirit talking boards, there are rules as well. And one is, you really can't ever destroy a Ouija board. But these people are able to escape with a movie kind of contradicting it. But again, at the same time, that movie does end with a nod back to, you can't really get rid of the board. You can only hope and run away.
Yeah. It's just one of those ones. Yeah, it's like, you're gonna do, research, or you're gonna look up all this information and stuff like that. You should probably look up research on your Ouija board and your lore and figure out, because it's like, yeah, I mean, like you said, they always think that they're destroying it and they're gonna win, but ultimately at the end, you find out that the Ouija is indestructible and will always win. But the only bad part about the Ouija board surviving, and the hauntingness of the board coming back, is that kind of leans into them doing a possible third movie, which if they would have just destroyed the board and maybe every board on the planet,
we could have all
then
been saved.
we could have been saved from the third Witchboard movie.
All right. Okay, I got this, Devil. Give me this one. This was my franchise. Rightfully so, for the record, though, this is my franchise. And, of course, Fangs, we always, appreciate, John's support with the Witchboard museums and being a part of our show. But I've always been a Witchboard guy. I'm a huge Ouija board fan. I always have been. Everybody knows that. Oh, this one hurts. This one hurt me, man. Because it's one of those things that when there's a franchise, you can watch things partially and easily. Things you care about, things you love, and enjoy things and know that things just aren't good. And it's like, yeah, but they're fun, you know? It's like we were talking about, a moment ago. You don't look at the same way Witchboard 2 as I do. And that's okay. But, bro, we equally understand that Witchboard 3 is a train wreck of a movie. It's just so strangely enough, it's just unapologetically awful. And it hurts my heart because the planchette for this movie was fucking awesome looking. So evil, just so rad. But the movie goes in about 15 different directions. And we've had plenty of conversations about anthology movies that we like. But this movie is so all over the place. Got a different type of hero, a different type of attack mode, but there's really no structure. It's got what you would have thought would have been a pretty rad suicide, but it really was more awkward as fuck. And the movie just has no structure. It just seems like that sheer people bash on like the third Exorcist movie for the fact that movie was actually filmed and finished without an exorcism. And then people realize, wait, the movie's called The Exorcist. How can there not be an exorcism? So they literally had to design one and squish it in there. That's actually factual. That's true talk right there when it comes to that movie. Witchboard 3 had so much of that feel of just a very over-the-top movie that they seemed like they wanted it to be just a demonic movie. But they realized later, fuck, we called it Witchboard. We kind of have to have a Ouija board involved.
Yeah, like you were saying, especially with, like I said, in the suicide in this movie, it's like, I mean, I would have probably offed myself quicker and better than he did from watching this movie. But yeah, it's got to be the worst suicide, in a movie ever filmed in the history of horror suicide in movies. I mean, the dude just literally just goes off a banister, and it's so bad. I mean, this movie was so bad, and a lot of it I think has to do with, we've talked a little bit about Witchboard 2 and about Amy's contract with her not wanting nudity, and Witchboard 1 and Witchboard 2 were both directed by the same guy, and Witchboard 3, they didn't ask him to come back. Theory is that it had a lot to do with him pushing back against her character, not having the nudity, and him standing behind his actress and allowing, and standing behind her and not forcing her to do the nudity. I mean, obviously in this movie there is nudity, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's so it goes into that. I mean, and the crazy thing about this movie, though, that I think is, like, you can watch any movie about Ouija boards, witch boards. I mean, there is Ouija sharks, there's Ouija's this, there's Ouija that, there's Ouija spelled like any other way, like BGs and everything else. There are, like, the most campiest, worst movies that you could possibly watch that are affiliated with witch boards and Ouijas. And those are a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Mainly compared to this movie. Like, it's just how bad this movie is. And it's like I said, it's not one of those ones where it's like, yeah, we're just shitting on it just to shit on it. This
No.
movie it's just bad. And like I said, we love bad stuff.
Yeah.
And we mean bad in a good way. Like you said, like our Sharknadoes and that. Those are horrible movies, but they're entertaining horribly bad. This movie was just dry, boring, not even that long, but made you seem like you were watching it for 4 hours. And like you said, has 47,000 different plot holes and plot theories and plot situations and changes and that, like, it just makes no sense whatsoever. I still can't tell you what the hell that movie is or is about.
And it's crazy too, dude, because here's the funny part about it. If that movie was done right, written, correctly, executed right, with certain parts staying the same, it sets up for a potential Ouija board 4 that could work, actually. And I'll explain. The thing about it is, David Newman's character, befriends this landlord who's a demon and traps his soul in the Ouija board. The demon crawl then, takes over his body, takes over his life and knocks up his wife. I mean, bro, if that's hilarious, by the way, but still, that is actually something that theoretically could work, could happen. Because now, even depending on how you play out the movie, you set it up for the potential that, similar to like the way it was in the second movie, The Fly, you do set up this potential of this child, almost the Omen Damien style, maybe starting off as a normal child, but then having thoughts, having ways he's reacting to something, and then maybe finds that his communication through like a Ouija board, or his obsession with maybe needing to keep like a planchette in his pocket or something, and maybe makes Ouija boards in like his sandbox. There's an actual potential for another movie they could have done had they literally not screwed this up so bad. And not even just screwed it up so bad, but just in epic fashion. And just like Devil said, Fangs, and especially coming from me, we love our unruly, campy, horrible movies. That's what makes life worth living, or our lives continue to live over hundreds of years. We enjoy it. It's fun. But bad is just bad. Badly written is just bad. And it also speaks a little bit to the movie industry, where, again, we do not know this to be fact, but it's like what Devil said. It's very easy to potentially hurt the little feelings of certain executives. And for Kevin, who's incredibly knowledgeable, very skilled, and very highly regarded with the movies he did for Witchboard 2, he's got ties in with Night of the Demons. He's got a lot of stuff that he is a part of in the horror community, and especially demonic stuff. For them to throw, the baby out with the bathwater because he stood by his actress, which is all you could want a director to do. And it just kind of shows that when you throw out the pro, you're left with an amateur.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing about this too. I mean, with that, the only I guess saving grace of Witchboard 3 was that this movie was so bad that they never did make another one, because like I said, when you bomb like that, like I said, you don't want to do that. So it kind of like killed the franchise. And then how many years now? You're 30 years, 40 years later, now they're, potentially, I know it's coming out soon, but they're doing the remake, reboot, or whatever of the Witchboard. So it's getting that tension, that traction back to the Witchboard. But yeah, it basically, like, two cool movies, and then them just almost ruining, the people wanting, for a while, even after this movie came out, you didn't see too many Ouija movies for a while, until eventually, like, they eventually came back into pop culture a little bit more and started getting into movies. But yeah, it was like that this movie, like, almost killed, killed it, and not a good way.
Yeah. No, 100%, brother. It's just the way it is. So, Fangs, look, if you're interested in a laugh in that way, look, check it out. And it hurts my heart because, Ouija boards are one of the things that I know best, next to coffins. And that one it bums me out. So let's break it down a little bit, my friend. It is about that time to put together where we put the Witchboard franchise on the obituaries, and then what will ultimately leave to the victor in this showdown of franchises between Witchboard and Poltergeist. So here's my thing. I rank the first Witchboard honestly very high. It's not, again, it's not without its camp. It's not without its kind of laugh riot type stuff and a little bit of for real. But the fact of the matter is that movie was also a corner of the market. That movie was the first of its kind. Witchboards have been in many previous movies, even back to black and white. The Exorcist was the first time that a Ouija board was really used as a major player that caused something in a movie. But this is the first movie that the Witchboard was the movie. It was the focal point. Basically, it was the star. And there's also little cool tidbits. You know, a while back, you know, when Tawny was still with us, we had a conversation, and a cool mini quick story for the Fangs is that they had reached out to Hasbro, who owns Ouija Board, to put them in the movie. And they didn't want their name attached to that. They didn't want to be affiliated with this, you know, cult, weird spin-off movie. They didn't want to be involved because they didn't know how it was going to work. And the movie did well, was so well received in general, and developed such a massive cult following that Tawny had told me once that Hasbro actually called and apologized for not allowing them to use the Hasbro name, which I always found to be incredible. And that was also something that I told her. I was like, you need to understand and keep in mind that you got a legitimate large conglomerate, a corporation, to say I'm sorry. That is a task in itself. So I always thought that was a cool story. But anyway, the Witchboard movie, I've always ranked it very high. It's an 8.5 for me personally, because it's a corner of the market. It really put the focus on it. And similar to Scream, I love the fact that they did put an emphasis on rules and educating people that when it comes to Ouija boards, there actually really are things you need to know about it. When it comes to the second movie, it's nowhere near like the first. The first is the first. I enjoy it, though. I think it's a quality movie. It really is great. I give it a 7.5 when it comes to that one. Again, it's consistently entertaining to me. I like it. I enjoy it. I've watched it many times. I'll continue to watch it more. And again, I love the artwork. The Witchboard 2 movie poster artwork has always been one of those high-ranking ones for me where I'm like, man, they got it right. And I always just thought it was so cool. When it comes to the third one, though, that's the problem. That's just a plummet. It's a 3 to 4 at best for me, because I can make it through the movie due to the fact that I love Ouija boards like I do. But I'm not going to sit here and pander to the movie or blow it, because it's too shriveled up. It's just not good. I think we made that abundantly clear. So, it squeaks higher than our lowest score at a 3.5. It doesn't quite match Rotten Tail, but I'll give it a 3.5 because I'm giving it a courtesy half point because it's a Witchboard movie. So it should consider itself lucky when it comes to that. And overall, again, being objective and being transparent, because that's what the show is about, is the fact of the matter is the franchise as a whole, for me, I give it a 7. Again, even with such a high mark that I give the first Witchboard, because I do think it's proper and deserves that. The sheer just idiocracy of the third movie is a death blow in the trilogy and really has to be acknowledged as a drag down point. So as much as I love the movies and I'd love to rock those 8.5s or something to really stamp my victory in this, or attempt at a victory, I got to be traditional and I got to be honest when it comes to this. I give the franchise an overall, 7 for this.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely gotta agree with you. Like I said, the first one is definitely the high mark. Just like I said, it's just a staple for Halloween movies. It's a staple for just a good, fun movie. Like you said, it was a movie that kind of put Witchboard in the center and front, it's being like a background character or something like that. And then obviously we have our little connection love with Tawny and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
even before she passed away, we love this movie. But now with her passing, it just makes that movie just even more special because we got her in that movie. Like I said, the second one, like I said, I don't really give it as high as a mark, but I still like it as a fun movie. The only one that I kind of disagree with you right now, I guess, as far as the rating wise, is the 3.5 for the third one. I honestly think Rotten Tail is actually better than Witchboard 3 because I at least watched it and laughed. I was
Oh, you are
bored.
the devil.
I was bored watching Witchboard 3. Like, literally, I was like, when the fuck is this going to get over with so I could stop watching this movie? It was so bad that I didn't even want to continue watching it. But I was like, maybe something might happen that, because I don't remember seeing it before. I was like, maybe something might happen that might be cool and I would like to discuss when we're talking about this movie. But yeah, no,
That's fair. That's
that
fair.
movie should get negative numbers, but I don't think we're gonna go that far. But I mean, as far as the whole, I agree with you, 7. I mean, as far as the trilogy wise, yeah, definitely. Mainly because that number one, that first Witchboard is just such a killer fucking movie, and such a just a good storyline. Like I said, to continue on, like I said, I liked the second one. I liked the storyline of it. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's as good, as good as it could have been, but it definitely, like I said, and then like I said, that third one just plummets it so much. If this franchise would have just done 2, it probably would have been way higher of a ranking, but just because that third one, and that's even being kind of nice, because like I
Yeah.
said, that third one was just, I don't know, to me it's just.
And again, I do stand by my courtissy point.
Oh
Dude,
yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
love
I can understand. Like I said, to
like
me, I understand why you do it because you're a Witchboard guy. That's your thing. You're gonna they can Witchboard, even as bad as it can be, can never be that bad because at least it's got Witchboard. But yeah, to me, I was like, yeah, there's no amount of love. I mean, Drew Barrymore, Aja Argento, and everybody else that I love could have been naked throughout the whole entire movie, and I probably maybe would have given it a 3, but that's probably
oh
I'd give it a 3 for them in it, and that's it.
man, I can't even get a Drew Barrymore, Aja Argenta, and Danielle Harris Ouija orgy, and still could barely get a 3 out
I
of
mean,
it.
it would depend if the whole movie was them like having an orgy over a
On
Ouija
a
board.
Witchboard.
Then yeah, then that would probably beat the first movie, but but even if, like I said, the storyline that they had in that movie, even if you had a cameo with all 3 of them in the movie and had nudity, it would give it a little bump,
Yeah.
but not very much.
Yeah. So what are we saying, my friend? Do we like 7 for it?
Yeah, I can go with 7. I mean, like I said, I probably could go a little bit lower only because like I don't feel part 2 is nearly as good as you. But I'm like, you know what? Overall, I think I'm cool with the 7 just because of
Yeah.
how much I love that first one.
Yeah, because I'm definitely with you. Because again, I stand by my personal high markings on the first movie. I totally understand 100% where you're coming through for with the second movie, and we're definitely in agreement when it comes to the third one. They just they get that love from me for it being something that I care about. But I'm definitely with you. I think that's cool. I definitely think it's the way to go. It is definitely a solid victory, though, as well for Poltergeist, because again, Poltergeist also, the one thing about that franchise, it has a consistency that Witchboard doesn't. And here's the thing. Witchboard 3 could have been way more well written, obviously, but way more well written to where, let's just say, it was at least a 6.5, like a solid movie where, like, we did 8.5 for Witchboard, 7.5 for Witchboard 2, and 6.5 for Witchboard 3. But even if it was something like that, Poltergeist does have that consistency. It does have those reoccurring characters, multiple reoccurring characters, and an overall, its continuity is closer. It's a little bit more traditional. It's a little more dynamic. where you've got, frankly, 3 standalone movies. Yes, a similar theme, the same basic idea, but they're still 3 standalone movies. You can watch Witchboard and not even know there's 2 more. You can watch Witchboard 2 and not even have seen the first one or not even noticed that it's technically Witchboard 2. And same for Witchboard 3. You're still going to hate it, but it's its own kind of thing. You're like, oh, fuck, there were 2 before this? It's actually kind of one of the reasons I was a little bit late, not very late, but a little late getting into Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The first Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I ever saw was that horrific Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger Texas Chainsaw Massacre called The Next Generation. So I didn't watch the other Texas Chainsaws for years because my first impression was that horrific thing. But anyway, that's one of the things I do think also is an edge for Poltergeist when it does come to this showdown, is the fact that it is still a consistent overall story.
Yeah. Like I said, at least with, like I said, I mean, even as bad as the third one of Poltergeist is, it's still, you can watch all 3 of them and be entertained. You know what I mean? Where, like I said, you can be entertained watching that first Witchboard, the second Witchboard. Like I said, yeah, I mean, yeah, I was even going to mention that, like, if anybody who watches Witchboard 3 and goes, oh, I mean, I don't know who would watch part 3 first anyway, but I mean, you watch Texas Chainsaw 4 first, so I mean, anything is possible.
I can also clarify that also does go back to Blockbuster days when sometimes you do just grab something off the shelf because of like a cover, like I spoke so highly of the Witchboard 2 poster. I love it. Witchboard's regular consistent cover is awesome as well, with the axe going through the screaming photo of Tawny on top of a witchboard. I love the look of the third Witchboard poster. It's got that kind of cyborg, half almost Terminator look to David's character, mixed with, like I said, a bitchin' planchette. I mean, they did an awesome job designing that. The movie is just a shit show, though. But that's just what I mean, just for clarification purposes, is that, sometimes you scoop something up just based on visuals at something like a Blockbuster back in the day.
I don't know, maybe that's just my OCD. I could never pick a movie that was like on 3 or 4 or 5 if I've never seen any of the other movies again, just because it's so, I mean, that's kind of that, I mean, but again, that goes into like with that, I mean, hopefully if somebody does watch 3 before they watch any of the other ones, I hope it doesn't taint, because like you said, you were so hard. I mean, that's the same thing with me with the not Poltergeist, I almost said Poltergeist, with the fucking Paranormal Activity ones.
Yeah.
I heard so many good things about the further ones, but that first one was just so horrible to me that I just will not go and watch any of them. But yeah, so like I said, yeah, I mean, if you're really, really bored and you want something in the background while you're, drawing or learning how to do lobotomies or whatever you're doing, I don't care, you can put in 3. But yeah, 1 and 2, watch.
Absolutely.
3, have it on in the background.
Yeah.
While you're doing something more entertaining.
If you're a collector, give it a spot on
your
shelf, but no need to take it out of the plastic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely collecting wise. You get, like I said, you got to get, sometimes it hurts to get those movies that you don't want in your collections because they suck. Yeah. And this is one that don't go on Amazon and spend a lot of money. If you spend more than $5 for this movie, you've overpaid.
Absolutely, 100%. But make it make sense to you guys. Like, just scoop it up. Thrift shops, Amazon, eBay, wherever you can see it. But keep in mind, it's not good. Cool imagery on the cover. That's what we're giving it, and that's where we're leaving it. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs. Poltergeist has pulled the Witchboard over to the other side, never to be heard from again. When it comes to this showdown, victory goes to the devil, as Poltergeist, as an overall franchise, throws the Witchboard franchise into the inferno. It is an 8 for the Poltergeist franchise. It is a 7 for the Witchboard franchise on the obituaries. And there it is. There it shall be, and there it shall remain. Horns up, Fangs. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies. We got some shirts. We got some tanks coming up. We got some booty shorts. We got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up. Fangs out. All right, Fangs. It's time for a brand new Coffin Nails. We're going to talk about 2023's Don't Suck. It's actually a comedy horror movie. It stars Jamie Kennedy and stars Matt Rife. I actually happen to think that Matt Rife is fantastic. He's probably the biggest comic in the world right now. He really exploded on the scene the last couple of years. A lot of like YouTube, TikTok stuff that really just kind of blew up. But look, I think Matt Rife is actually pretty awesome. So that's one of the reasons I was really interested in checking out this movie. He basically plays the vampire Ethan. Jamie Kennedy plays basically a comic on the tail end of his career. Ethan is a very monotone, like, comic. He's not very good. He's not very funny because he basically puts his life out on Front Street as a vampire, but people don't really get it because they kind of think it's a shtick. They don't really understand what humor this guy is trying to do. Ethan, from all these many years, is also incredibly well off, and he basically convinces Jamie Kennedy's character, Pete, to be his opener for his tour. You know, Pete's struggling to keep himself afloat. You know, he doesn't have a lot of money. He's got a lot of demons and all that kind of stuff. So Matt Rife basically, with his character, he's like, look, dude, I'll pay for everything. Gas, lodging, I'll give you the money I would make on this tour. I'll pay you also to extra money just for me being on it. And it's basically like a road comedy relationship type thing. You know, they get to know each other. Jamie Kennedy's character has to kind of get used to Matt Rife's, you know, vampire stuff that he does and learning about what he has to do to feed, why he does it this way, and so on and so forth. You know, it comes to the end of the tour. They've gotten a lot tighter, but they're still trying to figure out exactly where to go from here. You know, Jamie's kind of curious and being turned. Ethan is like, you know, look, man, you don't want that. And in the middle of an argument, there ends up being, you know, a fatal car crash. I'm going to leave the end of the movie up to you guys for you to check it out and see whether or not we've lost Pete or whether or not he continues on with this new life that he's kind of learning about accepting and appreciating. Or other things like that. But it's going to get a 7 from me. Look, if you're looking for vampire, blood and guts and gore, you're really not going to get it. It's not that kind of movie. But it's an enjoyable movie. It's an enjoyable experience. And a 7 is what it's going to get on this episode of Coffin Nails.
Hey, it's your friend the Devil again with another quick movie review. Oh, I love odd things. So we're going to talk about Oddity from 2024. Oh yeah, it's a pretty cool, spooky, creepy, dark psychological horror film with a little bit of a wooden creature maybe. I don't know what the fuck that thing was. But anyway, you should check it out. You know, it's about a girl who gets killed and then her sister, who's blind and also a medium, is gonna go and figure it out. And let me tell you, no spoilers, do not fuck with a sister who's blind and also a psychic medium, whatever you want to fucking call her, clairvoyant, kind of witchy bitch. Anyway, you should go check out the movie. It was pretty fucking cool. And anyways, like it or not, Oddity is coming for you.
Ghouls and Fangs. Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe. We've got John Waters. But what else do we have?
We got the Witchboards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bizarre Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were gonna bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you gotta check it out, because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bizarre Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.
This is a part of the show where we talk about those who have died in the month of November. Gunnar Hansen, good old Leatherface, Jonathan Brandis from the movie It, and Michael Hudson's from the band In Excess, lost but never forgotten.